This is Bobby Boucher. And ever since he was a kid, all he ever wanted to do was just be the water boy for the foosball team. But unfortunately, all his life, people had always made fun of Bobby. And one day, he decided to do something about it.
Look at me! I'm the Waterboy, dude! Stop making fun of me.
And that's when Coach Klein realized that he had to get Bobby on the football team.
Mama said that.
So today, I am putting the Waterboy into College Football 26. Let's see how his career goes on the football team as we follow him on his road to glory. Now, Bobby had always been homeschooled, and he had spent a lot of time making water for the football team, so some of the most important things for him was that he would be able to stay the water boy and also stay close to his mama. And you see, now he never even thought that he would ever get the chance to go to college, so it was no surprise that most schools have never even heard of him. But since Coach Klein felt like he really saw something special in Bobby, Bobby Boucher would officially become a member of the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. And now that Bobby was a part of the team, he was mostly recognized for being a 31-year-old freshman. But since he had a lot of memories of people being mean to him throughout the years, he had a whole lot of tackle and fuel in order to get better. And the coaches had definitely noticed that the moment that he stepped on the practice field. But the unfortunate thing is that Bobby had come to the team when they were already 0-2 on the season. So Coach Klein told Bobby that he would have to try and do his best to open up a can of whoop-ass on their next opponent, because that would be the only way for them to potentially come up with their first win on the season, where they would be on the road to face off against Louisiana Tech. Now, to start his college football career, Bobby was out there just trying to get a handle on the speed of the game. But all of a sudden, he thought he heard the quarterback talking crazy to him.
What's the matter with you, boy? You too stupid to do what your coach tells you? No. No what?
Man, Bobby Boucher comes up with his first sack of his college football career. And it seems like the whole crowd knew that Bobby was only just getting started. Unfortunately, though, on this opening possession, this defense let up a lot of first downs, ultimately allowing Louisiana Tech to get down to the goal line where they pretty easily punched it in for a touchdown, tying this game up at 7 before they would get the ball back at the end of the first quarter. And somehow this defense would turn out to let up another big play downfield, as a receiver comes up with a catch over the top and is able to take it the distance for another score. And despite the fact that Bobby Boucher was out there doing his best to make some plays in the backfield, Louisiana Tech would continue to put points up on the board, giving them a now 30-7 lead at the end of the second quarter. But in a game where this Bobby Boucher-led pass rush was coming all day, eventually it would start causing some big-time turnovers that allowed the team to get back in it, bringing us to the fourth quarter where the Raging Cajuns had got stops all throughout the second half. And that wouldn't change here as Bobby would get off a blocker and come up with his second sack of the day, pretty much derailing another Louisiana Tech drive. And just like that, Bobby Boucher would come up with his first victory of his college football career, as they pull off one of the biggest victories in their school's entire history. And for that, they can largely thank the Waterboy, who helped lead the team with one of the most tackles and tackles for losses in this game. But the crazy thing about it is that Bobby was really only just getting better, and he would have a chance to come up with another big-time victory as he was heading into his first home game of this season, as Bobby and the Raging Cajuns, who still didn't really have many fans, but they were ready to face off against the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Now in this game, once again, the Raging Cajuns defense was playing well. Early on, they were able to come up with multiple big-time stops to limit UAB to only 3 points in the first half, which is where Bobby would start coming up with some really nice plays as he gets his third sack of the season. Bobby Boucher was already starting to establish himself as a dominant force on this defense, and his opponent would start to realize just how tough of a game they truly were in. Because it seems like in the biggest moments, Bobby was right there to come up with some big plays, helping his team come up with some huge stops on third down. But by the end of this game, they had no problem doing it on their own, as Louisiana actually came up with a sack-forced fumble, taking complete control of this game late in the fourth quarter. And soon Louisiana was on their way to earning their second win of the season, closing this game out 17-13, and it was in another performance where Bobby had come up with multiple tackles for losses. Bobby was doing so well that Coach Klein just had to let him know how happy the coaches were with him throughout the season so far. It felt like Bobby Boucher could go out there and help dominate opposing teams for the Raging Cajuns. And that's exactly what he would try to do in his next game on the road against Louisville. Because anytime he could throughout this game, Bobby was out there saying shablaka, just laying the boomstick on people, and he would also help make some big plays in the backfield for his team. And since Louisville didn't actually start trying to make just a close game until the end of the fourth quarter, Louisiana had already done enough to earn themselves a 3-game win streak, closing this game out 31-14, and at this point it seemed like everything was going well for Bobby Boucher. But it wasn't just because of football, because he had also reconnected with this girl named Vicky Valancourt. And Bobby had actually liked her so much that he decided to invite her back home to meet his mama, where she reminded him that she was not a fan of him playing foosball.
Remember when that man wanted you to play foosball, Bobby?
Yeah, Roy Orbison came. Coach Klein, I remember.
But you know what, man? At this point, Bobby really likes playing football. He's out there making a lot of friends, and he's meeting a lot of people around the campus. But when he was on the field, it seems like the opposing quarterbacks were always trying to say something mean to him.
Red 18! Needle dick! Needle dick! Needle dick! Your name is Needle Dick.
Oh nah, see, Bobby had to let this quarterback know early that he was not playing around. And that's exactly why on the following drive, Bobby would drop back into coverage and say, no! Bobby Boucher comes up with his first pick of his college football career, and he takes it across the goal line for a touchdown. We are not even 3 minutes into this game, and Bobby Boucher is already dominating, giving his team a 7-0 lead early on that unfortunately would not last throughout the remainder of the first quarter, as Oregon State would go on to score some points to tie it up at 7. And they would actually get the ball back towards the end of the second quarter and come up with another big play downfield, scoring some points that now gave them the lead in the first half. But by the second half, it seemed like this team as a whole would lock back in, because not only did Louisiana take the lead, but they were back to creating some huge turnovers, as the cornerback picks this pass off and ultimately leads to the Raging Cajuns having a 2-possession lead. But at this point in the fourth quarter, Oregon State felt like they really had a chance to get back in it. And that's exactly why on this play, Bobby Boucher had something to say, as he forces his first fumble of his college football career. And although Oregon State had recovered it, this team was demoralized. They didn't know how much more they could do with Bobby going out there saying shablang, ultimately bringing us to a 4th down and 5 at the very end of the game. And after this pass would eventually fall incomplete, Bobby had helped bring his team to 4-2 on the season, coming up with a big-time win 34-24. And at this point, man, Bobby Boucher was all over the news. I mean, it actually got to the point where his old coach Red Bull U would start seeing him on TV, and he was so scared, man, he couldn't even eat his own food. This man was absolutely petrified after realizing that Bobby had earned his first Player of the Week, and not just the conference, because for the first time in his life, he was earning recognition on a national level. But Bobby had known how important it was to keep this level of play up going forward throughout the season, especially as Louisiana was heading back on the road to face off against another tough team, where they would be set to face off against Texas State. Now throughout this game, Bobby was out there coming up with some gravity-defying tackles. He was going so crazy that by the time the fourth quarter rolled around, this man looked like he was flying just to make a play, ultimately bringing us to a 3rd down and 14 where Bobby would break through the line and come up with his first sack of the day. A huge play on 3rd down that would ultimately derail this offensive drive and allow the Raging Cajuns to come up with a 13-9 victory. And they can definitely thank Bobby Boucher, who helped lead the team with tackles for loss. But as great as he was playing, he did feel pretty bad about lying to his mama.
So, Bobby, did they ever catch that gorilla what escaped from the zoo and punched you in the eye?
No, Mama, the search continues.
But with the Raging Cajuns now on a 5-game win streak, and in order to help his team potentially get to a bowl game, he would have to stay locked in, especially in his next matchup at home against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now in this game from the very start, you could tell that Iowa was in for a long day, because throughout the first half, Bobby Boucher was absolutely terrorizing this offense, coming up with his 2nd sack of the day, and it turns out that this was only just the beginning. Because with 5 minutes left in the second quarter, Bobby had actually seen the quarterback escape out of the pocket and decided to say, "Wang!" forcing his 2nd fumble on the season that led to a turnover. But with Bobby pretty much dominating this quarterback all game, some of the Iowa players would begin getting mad and start talking crazy about Bobby's mama.
Best of luck to you on an upcoming play.
I'll be playing with your mama tonight.
62.
Now, although Bobby would have a hard time recognizing the running back's number, That didn't really seem to matter when Bobby decided to say, "Chaplain!"
Drop kicked it. Looks like Boucher knocked him out cold.
I love my mama very much. Now you know that.
Man, by halftime, Bobby Boucher was the standout player for the team. And it did not stop in the second half as Bobby was continuously obliterating this quarterback in the backfield, eventually coming up with his third sack of the day. And after derailing yet another drive, the Waterboy had helped the Raging Cajuns put another game away, as Louisiana would go on to dominate 42-10. I mean, it was pretty much impossible for Iowa to consistently put some points up, especially when they had Bobby Boucher living in the backfield. There was almost nothing a team could do when facing off against a player like this. And at this point, Bobby felt like he was having a great game every single week. But he also still felt horrible about his mama because she was spending a lot of time trying to find that gorilla. But soon Mama would also let Bobby know that she did not want him hanging around Vicky Valancourt anymore. Now Bobby didn't really know how to feel about that quite yet, but he did know that with his team being over halfway through the regular season, he knew that it wouldn't be long before he would get to spend more time with her. But first he had to help his team keep their 6-game win streak alive, starting in their next one at home against Southern Mississippi. Now unfortunately for the first time in a few weeks, Louisiana did not get off to a great start, giving up a touchdown early on that allowed Southern Miss to take the 7-0 lead. But after a play where Bobby and his defense had given up a first down, Coach Klein had decided to take Bobby out the game for the rest of the quarter. And when he got back in the game, things didn't really change too much as Southern Miss had scored another touchdown, putting up points that now gave them the 2-possession lead. And now all of a sudden things were not looking good for Louisiana, but Bobby Boucher was still making plays. He had helped his team come up with enough stops that allowed Louisiana to get back in this game. Because after he came up with a drive-derailing sack here in the fourth quarter, the Raging Cajuns would find a way to take the lead with less than 2 minutes left. But for some reason on another play that was not really Bobby's fault, Southern Miss gets another first down and Coach Klein decides to take Bobby out again, bringing him off the field in literally the biggest moment of the entire night. And Bobby could really do nothing but watch as Southern Miss just drove down the field and came up with a touchdown with less than a minute left, ultimately leading to Louisiana's third loss of the season, as they were unfortunately not able to complete the comeback despite the fact that Bobby Boucher played really well when he was on the field. And obviously Bobby was pretty upset about the loss, but it was nice that he had a great defensive coordinator who was there to encourage him.
We live up by another day. We live up by another day.
Now at this point in the season, Bobby is the sack leader for his team and also has the most tackles for loss. This 31-year-old freshman was absolutely balling. And despite losing his last game, Bobby was happy that he got to hang out with his girlfriend, Vicky Valancourt. It turns out that she really likes when he plays football. So that not only motivated him to help get his team back on track, but also keep coming up with some big plays throughout the season, just like he planned to do in his next game against South Alabama. Now in a game where Louisiana was dominating on offense, it also turned out that Bobby Boucher was dominating on defense. He had done such a great job helping his team come up with big plays all afternoon, that by the end of the third quarter, Louisiana was already back to winning another game on the year, closing this one out 20-14, and all of a sudden the Raging Cajuns felt extremely confident going forward throughout the year. Because despite the fact that the Waterboy was not in the running to earn a single award for his performance so far this season, they knew that Bobby Boucher had potential to get them back to a bowl game. But in order to do so, they would have to take care of business in the last few games of the regular season, starting in their next one that would be at home against the University of Louisiana Monroe. And unfortunately for ULM, early on in this one, Bobby Boucher was seeing demons.
Halt! I forbid you to talk to that enchantress. She's the devil.
She not the devil. She the most beautiful woman in the world.
I never said she was the devil.
She the most beautiful woman in the world.
Oh, please don't hurt me.
Bobby was coming up with plays that were so crazy that they had to credit his teammates for the stat because this could be considered assault. At one point in this game, Louisiana was up 24-0. And it didn't look like the momentum was going to change anytime soon as Bobby had helped come up with another stop on third down, ultimately bringing us to the fourth quarter where Bobby had swim move past his offensive lineman and obliterated the quarterback, just absolutely destroying him for his second sack of the day. But with the Raging Cajuns up 31 in this game, this one was already out of reach, and Bobby Boucher had already done enough to help his team come up with a blowout victory, just absolutely demolishing an in-state opponent. And it was a big thanks to Bobby Boucher, who was all over this stat sheet, helping to lead his team with the most assisted and total tackles. And it seemed like he had really set the tone for his team going into the final game of the regular season. where in this one they would be on the road facing off against another Sun Belt opponent, Arkansas State. Now early on in this one, it was very clear that Arkansas State came ready to play, as their running back had actually bounced off a Bobby Boucher tackle and got himself in the end zone for a touchdown, giving them an early 7-0 lead that Louisiana would cut down to 7-3. And soon this defense realized that they had to start coming up with some big plays. So on this one, Bobby decided to say, "Wang," just absolutely knocking this running back into next Saturday, but he knew he could not stop there. So on his 3rd down and 14, he finds a way to get in the backfield and bring the quarterback down to the ground. Man, for the first time all year, Bobby had to make sure that he was not dreaming because he almost couldn't believe that he was doing this. I mean, this guy Bobby Boucher had so much tackling fuel, but it was just too bad that he couldn't say the same about the rest of his teammates, as a receiver actually broke off a tackle on 4th down and brought this one all the way to the end zone to extend Arkansas State's lead to 2 possessions. And in a game where it seems like Bobby was definitely doing his job, it was just really unfortunate that nobody else seemed to be doing theirs. And then I think what happened was that Coach Klein realized that he didn't even want to waste Bobby's talent in this game, because for some reason he actually decided to sit Bobby Boucher for the rest of the quarter, and all of a sudden Arkansas State went on to absolutely destroy Louisiana 36-10. And it turned out to be another game where Bobby had played pretty well, coming up with 9 total tackles and 2 tackles for loss. But despite coming off a loss in the last game of the season, Bobby Boucher had actually helped his team get to a conference championship game, where it looked like they were actually going to be facing off against one of, if not the first top 25 ranked team that they've seen all season. And they felt like they had to get the job done this time because this one would go a long way towards earning them a bowl game, and potentially even getting the team ranked in the top 25. But if they wanted any chance of doing so, the Waterboy would have to lock in as he was heading into the biggest game of his life, where in this one he and the Raging Cajuns are set to face off against Georgia State. Now in this one, it seems like the rest of the defense is back to playing well like Bobby Boucher, because on Georgia State's opening drive, they would eventually get them to a 3rd down and come up with a stop to hold them to 3 points. And even on another 3rd down late in the 2nd quarter, it was once again this Bobby Boucher-led defense coming up big, getting another stop that would eventually allow Louisiana to take a 10-3 lead after halftime, where even after the half, Bobby and this defense did not let up, as Bobby was out here still absolutely obliterating players. But then on a play where Bobby and his defense didn't even let up a 1st down, Coach Klein still felt the need to take Bobby out the game, sitting him on the bench for the rest of the 4th quarter. But even without Bobby Boucher, Louisiana would still come up with the win, securing themselves a Sun Belt Conference title. And after starting out this season 0-2, it was very clear that Bobby Boucher had helped turn this team around. And thanks to the Waterboy, they were now considered to be one of the most ferocious teams in the country. And everybody on this team was extremely happy to be a part of it. But then all of a sudden everything would change, and Coach Klein was not happy, because it turns out that Bobby's old coach Red Boy U would find out that Bobby was homeschooled, and he discovered a way to make it so that Bobby Boucher was ineligible for their upcoming bowl game.
So allow me to say this to you one more time. You're fired.
And now all of a sudden Coach Klein realized that he had no choice but to bench Bobby. And the worst part is that it turns out that Bobby didn't even do anything wrong, as Coach Klein actually admitted that he forged Bobby's transcripts.
I did it. 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 It's me.
And the crazy thing about it, man, is that Bobby was having an incredible season. As a freshman, he earned himself 1st team All Sun Belt, and also established himself as one of the best young players in the country, as he also earned himself a nod as a freshman All-American. I mean, it is pretty crazy that he did all this and still eventually got benched. And it would actually be at the worst time, as they were about to face off against Coach Red Boy U in the Bourbon Bowl. Luckily though, the coaches found a way that would allow Bobby to play in the game. They would just have to find a way to pass a big exam with an A. But the only problem was that the exam was scheduled at the same time as the Bourbon Bowl. And with Bobby Boucher not being available throughout the entire 1st half, things were starting to look bad for Louisiana. And all the team could do was just think about Bobby when they were waiting in the locker room at halftime.
Remember when Bobby Boucher showed up at halftime and the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl, do you?
Now, as soon as Bobby Boucher entered this game, the defense started to show up. They had not only come up with multiple tackles for loss, but on 2nd and 13, they actually forced a fumble, drawing this ball loose as it was picked up by a defender, and ultimately brought all the way to the end zone for a touchdown, allowing Louisiana to finally take a lead in this game, and this seemingly set the tone for them going forward. Because soon by the end of the third quarter, they had Bobby Boucher in the backfield coming up with tackles for loss. And this was great because backed up in their own red zone, they needed somebody to make a play, leading to a 2nd down and 12 where it turns out that Bobby Boucher comes up with a big-time sack, forcing a fumble for his team, leading to another turnover. And with the Raging Cajuns seemingly having all the momentum at this point, it was no surprise that they would soon find themselves up 21-10. And it didn't really seem like there was much Arizona State can do when Bobby Boucher was out there saying shablaka, just knocking the daylights out of his opponent as he was leading to another 3rd down. And on his 3rd and inches, the quarterback was so shaken up that he was out there overthrowing receivers. And at this point, Coach Klein realized that he didn't even have to leave Bobby on the field anymore, because it turns out that they had already done enough to win the Bourbon Bowl, closing this one out 21-18, and Coach Redboy U couldn't even believe that he lost to his former Waterboy. Nevertheless though, Louisiana was now Bourbon Bowl champions, and they were led in the second half where Bobby Boucher had 6 total tackles and 2 tackles for loss. He helped absolutely dominate this team as soon as he showed up, and it was really no different from the way that he had been dominating all season, as it turns out that he would have the 3rd most sacks and tackles for loss in his conference. Mind you, Bobby Boucher is just a freshman and he had never played foosball before. I mean, he was literally 1 sack away from tying the school record for the most in the season. But he would not have had such a great year if it weren't for Coach Klein, who it turns out that after a great season, he now actually has a bunch of head coaching offers and might actually go to a different school. But he was just telling the Waterboy that the only way he goes somewhere else is if Bobby Boucher comes with him. They had a chance to go to a bunch of different schools all throughout the nation. The only thing is that Bobby's mama still doesn't know that he plays foosball, so Bobby might be limited to schools that aren't too far away from home. Either way, going into the offseason, Mr. Coach Klein and Bobby Boucher had some decisions to make. Which brings us to today, where it turns out that Coach Klein has a ton of offers to be a head coach at another school, but he knew the only way that he could also get Bobby Boucher to transfer is if Bobby would finally tell his mama about him playing football. And it was safe to say that initially she was not happy.
Foosball? You playing the foosball behind my back?
But after realizing how much money Bobby could make from NIL deals, soon Mama was completely okay with it. But she encouraged Bobby and Coach Klein to go somewhere that was relatively close to home and find a place that could help Bobby be the best player that he could possibly be. So after Coach Klein had officially signed with his new college, Bobby Boucher decided to follow him immediately, and ultimately they would both end up signing with the Texas Longhorns. But now that Bobby Boucher is officially in Texas, unfortunately they don't have his number 9 available because they gave it out to a familiar face. Because Jonah Williams, one of the biggest two-sport athletes in the nation. Hey, I'm not gonna lie, bro, this looked nothing like Jonah Williams. This dude looked more like Boucher from Phineas and Ferb than it looks like Jonah. Either way, Jonah Williams had number 9, so Bobby had to settle for a new number, and ultimately he decided to go with number 0. Now, as soon as fall camp hit, Coach Klein wanted Bobby to prove that he deserved to be the starting linebacker. The Texas Longhorns have a pretty great roster full of a lot of 5-star athletes, but at this point a lot of people consider Bobby Boucher to be a 6-star, which is exactly why he had no problem becoming the official starting linebacker for the Longhorns. But now that Texas was heading into their first game of the season, Coach Klein told Bobby that he was going to have him moving around the defense. He was going to put him out there at edge rusher because he felt like he could become one of, if not the best one in the nation. So now the Waterboy was looking forward to playing a new position on a new team as he was heading into his first game of the season against UTEP. Now on one of the first plays of the season, Coach Klein did put Bobby out there at edge rusher, and it didn't take long for some of his opponents to recognize him.
Hey, Waterboy, you fixing to tackle all of us? I asked you a question, dumbass.
Bobby Boucher was already making an impact for his new team, and the entire crowd was hyped, because they were witnessing what could be the birth of a new Texas football legend. And soon Bobby was already helping to get his second sack of the day, putting an end to another UTEP drive, and it seems like that might become a theme for Bobby. Because soon they had UTEP backed up on their own 1.5-yard line, and Bobby Boucher was the first one there to help with the safety, combining for another sack on the night while putting some points up on the board, leading to a game that would ultimately end up 16-0 after halftime. And Texas pretty much had all the momentum at this point, especially after Bobby knocked the sonic coins out this running back, forcing him to fumble, leading to a Longhorn recovery. And now it looks like Bobby has helped his new team come up with their first win of this season. They go on to beat UTEP 19-7, and it was mostly thanks to their defense, led by the Waterboy, who had 5 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. He would go on to earn an SEC Defensive Player of the Week in his first game as a Longhorn. And it's not too long after that where Bobby earns his first NIL deal of the season, so now he's able to send some of that money back home to mama. But you see, Bobby knows he has a lot more work to improve on because he has a long season ahead of him. And considering the Longhorns' first 2 weeks are supposed to be some of their easiest games, Bobby was looking forward to having another great performance in his next one, as Texas was set to face off against New Mexico. Now early on in this one, Bobby and his defense were swarming the ball carrier almost every play, coming up with multiple stops here in the first half against New Mexico State. And at one point they were getting so mad that they started talking crazy to Bobby.
We must be a little lost. It looks like we ended up in Retardville, USA.
Oh yeah, they shouldn't have said that to Bobby, because all that did was just give him some more tackling fuel, and he definitely used it on this next play, as he gets his first sack of the game to put an end to another New Mexico State drive. And at this point, the Waterboy and this defense were absolutely on fire. By the end of the second quarter, the Longhorns would be up 17-0. But this Texas defense was playing like they were still down 17, dropping the quarterback in the backfield for their 4th team sack of the night. And now Texas pretty much had all the momentum by the time the third quarter came around. Because in a game where the quarterback was just petrified to get sacked again by Bobby, he would end up throwing this ball up to the secondary where it would get picked off, giving the ball back to Texas with an already 3-possession lead, doing enough to come up with their second victory of the season, as the Longhorns went on to absolutely dominate New Mexico State 34-0, mostly due to another Bobby Boucher and Jonah Williams-led performance, both of which who had at least 4 tackles for loss, and Bobby ended up with 1.5 sacks. Now this was a great start to the season for this defense, but the offense was also putting in some work too, as another familiar name, Khalid Lockett, was already in the running to win a Heisman, along with at one point the #1 receiver in the country, Decorian Moore. Now at this point of the season, Coach Klein and the rest of the staff was extremely happy with what they were seeing from Bobby, but soon they were going to start needing a little more out of him, because at this point they were now going to start playing some tough games throughout the rest of their season. Luckily, their next one would be another game in front of the home crowd, as the Longhorns were now heading into a game against one of the best teams in all of the Big Ten, the Michigan Wolverines. Now in the first quarter of this one, Michigan, led by Bryce Underwood, was showing that they were definitely a better team than what Texas had faced over the past couple weeks, easily getting down the field towards the goal line on the first play of the game. And it was not too long after where Michigan was punching it across for a touchdown, putting them up by 7 before eventually Texas would tie it up. Now Michigan did a great job getting down the field again in the second quarter, but this time they were not able to complete the job, bringing us to the end of the half where Michigan now had the lead. But this Texas defense would start stepping up by snagging a pick in enemy territory. A big turnover for the Longhorns that now brings us to the fourth quarter, where they are up 14-10, and it seems like they have a lot of momentum on their side. Because despite the fact that Michigan has the ball deep in the red zone for the 3rd time in this game, they try to take a shot deep to the end zone here. Dang, bro, let me see. Well, it looks like it ended up incomplete, which now brings us to the final drive of the game. And with Michigan desperately needing to get back into field goal range, it was Bobby Boucher who was making it infinitely more difficult, as he bends around his left tackle and finds a way to bring Bryce Underwood down to the ground, putting them behind the sticks on a 4th down and 12. But on a play where Bryce Underwood was going for the win, he instead threw a pick, giving the Longhorns back the ball in the final moments of the game, doing enough to officially put this one away, as Texas comes up with a narrow 14-13 victory. And at this point, with Bobby Boucher going for 6 tackles for loss, it became clear that he was now the leader of this defense. And the great thing about it is that he was making some real improvements to his game almost every single week. And a lot of fans felt like he had the chance to break the single-season sack record for Texas. But although Bobby already has 5 on the season, he knows that there's still a long way to go. And it wouldn't get any easier as Texas was now starting to have some games on the road, starting in their next one where Texas would face off against their first SEC opponent of the season, the University of Ole Miss. Now things were going pretty well early on for this Texas defense as Bobby Boucher helps combine for a sack, a big play that actually puts an end to Ole Miss's opening drive, bringing us to the second quarter where the Texas offense still has no points, but the defense is definitely doing their job, taking down the running back before they have a chance to move the sticks and giving the ball back to Texas where they would finally score their first points. And it seems like at this point Ole Miss was just not able to get anything going on offense. They even came out here and threw a pick right before half. And after halftime, they would once again be brought to another 3rd down. But backed up against their own goal line, they were definitely in danger of Bobby Boucher and this defense coming up with another sack, this time in the end zone for a safety, and it was safe to say that this definitely set the tone for the Longhorns. Because going forward throughout this game, Texas now had a 2-possession lead, And on defense, they were continuously forcing turnovers, coming up with a pick that allowed Texas to remain in control until late in the fourth quarter, where although Ole Miss was finally coming up with their first points of the game, at this point it was too little too late. Because thanks to this defense, Texas was coming up with a 9-7 victory, closing this one out against their first SEC opponent of the year thanks to Bobby Boucher and the rest of this defense. This squad looks like it could become one of the best units in the entire nation. But now at this point of the season, the Longhorns will be facing some big tests over the next few weeks. And Coach Klein lets Bobby know how important it is for him to stay on campus and work with the team. But he did reassure him that he'll go back home himself and check on Bobby's mama. Now Bobby didn't have too much time to think about this at the moment because he was going into his toughest game of the year, with Texas now heading into another road game against another SEC opponent. This time though against one of the top-ranked teams in the country, as the Longhorns were in enemy territory to face off against number 3 Alabama. Now on the first play of the game here against the Crimson Tide, Bobby Boucher had burst up the middle and brought the quarterback down for a sack. Man, Bobby hit the quarterback so hard the announcer thought something was wrong with him.
There's a lot of pain and shame in those eyes.
Friends, it's all over.
Wow, that is a disturbing image.
Either way, this defense was off to an incredible start after they got a stop here on third down. But after the Texas offense had turned the ball over, they put the defense in a little bit of a predicament as they were allowing Alabama to move down the field. But they did get to a third down and 4 where Bobby had jumped off sides, sacked the quarterback and created a fumble, but obviously this was not going to count. Eventually they let Alabama get to third and goal and they unfortunately let up a touchdown, putting this game at 7-0 early on, and after another Texas turnover, they're in bad position once again with the ball already on their side of the field. And although Bobby had obliterated this quarterback again, the Longhorns would also again be pushed to third down, where this time they find a way to get a stop, bringing us to after halftime, where not only is this Texas offense failing to put up points, but this defense does not look like it's doing its job either, as this defense gets gashed up the middle for a 31-yard touchdown. An absolutely horrible play that pretty much gave Alabama all the momentum that they needed going forward. Because by the end of the third quarter, even with Bobby Boucher coming up with his second sack of the game, this would not be enough, and Texas would go on to take their first loss of the season, getting shut out against Bama 20-0. And Bobby was definitely not happy considering that the defense had did more than enough to keep the offense in it. But regardless of the loss, Bobby was still doing a great job staying focused in the classroom. He didn't want to risk the chance of Coach Red Boy U, who was now with Ohio State, to pull any crazy funny business and try to ruin his season. Because although the Longhorns were pretty good, they definitely were going to need Bobby, especially as they were going into another game against the top 10 team in the country. Now, for some reason, that Texas offense was turning the ball over a lot lately in their own territory. But they're lucky this defense early on only allowed 3 points, because eventually this game would be 7-3. And eventually Auburn does get back into field goal range, but this defense is trying to get a stop, and eventually they do, allowing Texas to take an 8-point lead here in the third quarter, where this time in field goal range the Longhorns defense picks this pass off in the end zone. And this seems to pretty much give them complete control in this game, as by the fourth quarter they were up 21-6. And Bobby didn't really even have to do much today because his defense seriously stepped up, creating another turnover that was absolutely enough to put an end to this game. The Longhorns take this one 21-6, and they felt good about getting back on track against the top 10 team in the country. But Bobby felt even better about hearing from his girlfriend Vicky Valancourt. She tells him that she's going to come visit her aunt in Austin. So she was hoping that she could see him too, but she also told him that Coach Klein was at his mama's house just the other day. Now Bobby could swear that Coach Klein already visited Mama already, so he definitely thought that was a little weird, but he couldn't really think about it too much yet, because for now he had another big game coming up. This time against one of the biggest rivals in the history of Texas' program, as in the Red River rivalry, the Longhorns are facing off against the Oklahoma Sooners. Now early on in this one, for the first time in a couple weeks, Bobby Boucher comes up with a sack, forcing Oklahoma to go 3 and out, and I think that really set the tone for this defense, because soon they were able to come up with another big stop here in the first quarter. And they were mostly inspired by Bobby Boucher, who was still mad that Coach Klein was spending time with his mama.
Gatorade not only quenches your thirst better, it tastes better too, idiot.
You're drinking the wrong water.
Gatorade.
H2O.
Gatorade.
H2O.
Water sucks. It really, really sucks. Water sucks.
No, stop
It
saying
really,
that.
really
You don't mean that.
sucks.
You're bad people.
Izquierdo.
Bobby Boucher was absolutely destroying Oklahoma, and things were looking good for the Longhorns before he comes out the game, and all of a sudden they were down by 10. So here in this third quarter, Bobby knew that he had to try and come up with a play. But it seems like the entire defense is on the same page as they hit the quarterback, and this ball is intercepted. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to go all the way back to the crib, but the offense had still put up a touchdown. And soon by the end of the third quarter, on another third down, Bobby had rushed off the edge for his third sack of the game. A huge play that not only gives the offense the ball back, but is also his 10th sack of the season. Shout out to Bobby, because if it wasn't for him, the quarterback wouldn't be so petrified that he was throwing Stevie Wonder-ass passes. As the Longhorns get another pick that brings them deep into red zone territory. But unfortunately, Texas was only able to get 3 points, so Bobby took it upon himself to get his 4th sack of the game. This dude Bobby forced a fumble that almost got his offense the ball back, and it's really too bad that they didn't, because soon, Oklahoma, just like Alabama a few weeks ago, was running right up that Texas Longhorn defense, taking this one all the way to the end zone for a touchdown that puts them up 7 late in this game. And after this Texas offense was not able to put up points, they take their 2nd loss of this season, dropping this one to their rivals, and it was definitely not a good day for Texas. The only bright side is that Bobby Boucher got to see Vicky Valancourt, and she was making him feel a lot better.
Yes. I appreciate what you're showing me right now.
Despite the loss, though, Bobby had an incredible game, earning himself another SEC Defensive Player of the Week. And at this point in the season, he still had a pretty good chance of breaking the single-season sack record. He was just going to have to keep playing well going into the back half of his season. And he definitely planned to going into his next game, which should be an easy one, as the Longhorns are taking on unranked Syracuse. Now, it was not long into this game before Bobby would come up with a sack, getting off to a great start in this game by putting Syracuse behind the sticks. And this seemed like it was going to be the theme all throughout this game, because on another drive on third down, Bobby just sheds off this tackle and gets to the quarterback for his 2nd sack of the game, definitely bringing a lot of momentum towards the Longhorns as they would eventually be up 13-3 in the second half. Things begin to change a little bit here in the third quarter, though, because after Bobby drops this pick, the defensive coordinator decides to take Bobby out, and they did not put him back in until Syracuse was down at the goal line, and they were pretty easily getting across for their first touchdown of the game. And the only thing that made it worse was the fact that the Texas offense had turned the ball over down at their own goal line, giving Syracuse another opportunity here as it got to a 4th and goal, but they were not able to convert. And it turns out that this was actually enough to get Texas another W, as they somehow closed this game out 15-10. And the Waterboy had dominated another team with 9 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. The Waterboy was already having a better season than he had the previous year, and he still had hopefully 5 games left on his schedule if he can get to an SEC championship. But he knew the only way Texas could get there is if they kept their win streak alive, which was definitely going to be a challenge as they head on the road against 15th ranked Tennessee. Now early on, Tennessee was doing a great job moving themselves upfield towards the red zone, but they would eventually get pushed to a third down where Bobby Boucher is there to make a play, bringing the QB down to the ground and forcing them to settle for 3, bringing us to a 7-3 lead here in the second quarter. And unfortunately for Tennessee, they began making a lot of mistakes like this interception. A big pick by Jonah Williams, and it now looks like Texas has complete control going into halftime, at least until Tennessee had dotted up this defense and went right downfield for an easy touchdown, now bringing this lead a little bit closer, but Texas would extend it once again, taking us here to a third down where Tennessee was easily able to convert this, picking up some yards that puts them in position to score. But Bobby and his defense was now holding them to a 4th down, and all they had to do was just come up with a stop, but they got scored on, as Tennessee now makes this game 21-19. And although they would miss their 2-point conversion, Texas would turn the ball over in their own territory, bringing us to a 3rd down and goal where thankfully Texas comes up with the stop. And better yet, they score a touchdown to take the lead, which brings us to what could be the last play of the game. That Tennessee quarterback was panicking though and gets sacked for no reason, ultimately leading to Texas taking a 27-22 victory, taking down another top 25 ranked team in the country, and this team looked like it was in great position to have some postseason success. And at this point, Coach Klein and Bobby already talked about how he was clapping Bobby's mama's cheeks, and Bobby had eventually got over it because he was just happy that she was happy. Now at this point in the season, Bobby and his defense were pretty much dominating every single game, whether it be the Waterboy coming up with a sack, or this defense just playing good enough coverage to come up with a pick. This entire side of the field seemed to be on the same page as they came up with a big win against South Carolina. And with only a couple games left in the regular season, Bobby knew that he had to keep up with his schoolwork, and he was doing a great job of doing so. The coaches were definitely happy with him because he spent extra time studying for his exam. He even did so well that his grade got bumped up to a 3.0. And now there weren't many people calling him dumb anymore. But the Longhorn season would continue on as they were now pretty much favorites to make the college football playoffs. They just got to take care of business going into their last 2 games, starting with their next one at home against Missouri. Now, one thing that started to happen a lot, even when it wasn't 4th down, was that Bobby Boucher would end up getting taken off the field. This time it allows Missouri to get downfield to another 3rd and 5, where this time they got stopped, forcing Missouri to kick a field goal while Texas takes the lead with a touchdown, leading us to another 3rd down where although Bobby did not come up with the sack, he forced a bad throw that led to an interception, causing a huge turnover that would allow Texas to take the lead 14-3. Where now at the end of the 2nd quarter, it was Bobby Boucher coming up with his first sack of the game, but immediately he was being taken out. Luckily, it didn't seem like Texas needed his help too much as they were soon up 24-3. Somehow though, Bobby worked around the edge and came up with his 2nd sack of the game, forcing a fumble that is picked up by Missouri, but they are still forced to settle for 3. And all of a sudden, Bobby and his defense just turn it on as they annihilate the quarterback in the end zone, forcing another safety on the season, leading to a 29-6 ball game. But if you thought Bobby Boucher's impact would end right there, you would definitely be mistaken, as the Waterboy comes up with another drive-killing sack on 3rd down, pretty much putting this game away. But Bobby still had to throw off this lineman and truck through another one before helping his teammate come up with his 4th sack of the day. A huge play that not only breaks the quarterback's ribcage, but brings the Longhorns to 9-3 on the season, closing this one out 32-6 with a huge game from Bobby Boucher. He absolutely dominated in this one, especially throughout the 2nd half. I know this quarterback better have nightmares about Bobby. But at this point, Bobby was taking care of his schoolwork before making some well-needed upgrades, because now it is time for Bobby to head into the final game of the regular season. And this had potential to be one of the biggest games of the season as both teams were fighting for playoff spots, with the Longhorns closing their season out at home against the 6th-ranked team in the country, the LSU Tigers. Now early on in this one, just like they have all season, this Texas defense was coming up with a stop on 3rd down, and they were pretty much dominating all throughout the 1st quarter as they ended up with a pick in enemy territory. A huge win that should have allowed Texas to at least tie this game up at 3, but unfortunately they couldn't even do that. But on top of that, LSU went on to go pick up a 1st down on their next drive, and immediately after, Bobby Boucher was taken out the game. He did eventually come back in later on to help Texas get a big stop on 3rd down. But soon LSU was driving right back downfield, and for some reason yet again, Bobby was being taken out the game. But at least the offense was making some plays to make this one a little bit closer. Eventually they would even take the lead after halftime. But for some strange reason, even though Bobby was doing a pretty good job, the defensive coordinator continued to take Bobby out the game, and he was forced to watch as LSU took the lead back. Now luckily Texas would find a way to tie this game up, and the defense did a good job at bringing LSU to another 3rd down. But again, Bobby is coming out the game until LSU is down in the red zone. But at least they brought him in on 3rd down where he can help come up with a big stop to hold LSU to 3. But he still has to hope that Texas can get downfield and put up points that can either tie or win this game. But only after a few plays they get stopped and lose the final game of this season, dropping this one 23-20. And this was definitely a pretty bad loss for them to take to an SEC opponent. But it wouldn't be nearly as bad of a loss as they were about to take, because it turns out that Coach Red Boy U had something planned up his sleeve all season, as it turns out that he paid the NCAA committee to conduct an investigation on Bobby Boucher, putting out false reports that he's been taking PEDs his entire college career. Now this was bad for multiple reasons, but mostly because now Bobby Boucher was ineligible. And rightfully so, Mr. Coach Klein was pissed. Because not only did Coach Red Boy U's quarterback win the Heisman using Coach Klein's green playbook, but Bobby Boucher was having an incredible season, putting up astronomical numbers this year playing both edge rusher and middle linebacker. He dominated pretty much every single game that he played this year, earning himself a bunch of trophies and honors including First Team All-SEC and First Team All-American. He even helped Texas get to the college football playoffs, where unfortunately Bobby would not be eligible to play, because the NCAA was apparently still doing their investigation, and it looked like it would last throughout the entire playoff run. Coincidentally, they would actually finish their investigation the day after Texas gets eliminated from the playoffs. And also in a crazy coincidence, Ohio State would go on to win the national championship. But after a season where Bobby Boucher had established himself as the best defensive player in the country, he and Coach Klein realized that they have to find a way to have a better season next year. Whether it be with Texas or with a different school, they have to try to find a way to take down Coach Red Boy U in Ohio State. So the Waterboy and Coach Klein definitely had some things to think about going into the offseason. and some huge decisions to make. Which brings us to today, where Bobby has some decisions to make on his future in college football. But it turns out that his mama was going to make that decision much easier. Because you see, it turns out that mama actually got real sick while Bobby was away, so he and Coach Klein had to come back during the offseason to take care of her. And after talking about it for a little bit, they realized that they might have to stay closer to home. Bobby and Coach Klein were going to have to pick a new school close to Louisiana, but they knew that there was only one place that would allow them a chance to compete for a championship. So when it came to Bobby Boucher's next college decision, he decided to sign with the LSU Tigers. Now, as soon as Bobby got to LSU, just like Texas, they also did not have his number 9. But they did have the same number that he wore last year, so he decided to stick with 0. And soon Bobby was off the training camp more than proving that he belongs on this team. A team full of absolute dogs, by the way, as it is a 5-star program and has a 91 overall defense. And the people of Louisiana were so happy that Bobby had returned that they actually came to his house to show him love. Because many of them truly believe that LSU had a great chance to have an incredible season. And now led by Bobby Boucher, they were about to head into their first game of the year, where they were looking to face off against the top 15 team in the country, the USC Trojans. Now, starting off his career with LSU, things were looking good for Bobby. But being back in Louisiana, he started to have some painful memories of his old head coach, Red Boy U.
You're fired!
Stop making fun of me.
Oh yeah, Bobby's already coming up with his first sack of his career with LSU. And it seems like early on he actually inspired his teammates because they come up with a sack to put an end to this drive. On the next drive though, down by 3, USC was moving. And Bobby Boucher was trying to change that, not just by coming up with big hits, but coming up with stops in the backfield. Unfortunately though, USC would continue to move the chains, and soon they would get to a 2nd and goal where Bobby was just not locked in, and allowed the quarterback to get right by him for a touchdown that gave USC the lead. By the second half though, Bobby was doing everything he could to help his team come up with stops. And although they were not doing a great job taking advantage of it, Bobby Boucher was still setting the tone for his team. He knocked the lights out of a dude before coming to the next play where the game was pretty much on the line. So Bobby knew that he would have to come out here and say, no! Bobby Boucher was coming up with an interception that would give his team a chance. He was already having an incredible performance in his Tiger debut, but he comes up with a turnover that allows his team to take the lead with 1 minute left in this game. And after getting USC to this 4th down, it turns out that the quarterback would scramble out of the pocket and pick up a bunch of yards. And all of a sudden it seemed like the Trojans had some momentum as they were soon inside the red zone, bringing us to a 3rd and 4 where Bobby did a great job playing his zone, but his teammates did not. And it turns out this score would lead to LSU's first loss of the season, as they dropped this one 17-14, while Bobby Boucher actually had a pretty good debut with the Tigers. He definitely wishes that they could have won the game, but at the very least they are still a top 10 team in the country. And they're going to have a good chance to pick up their first win against one of the worst teams in the country, as LSU is now heading into their first home game of the year against FCS East.
You can do it!
Now, playing against such a weak team, it did not take long before Bobby was terrorizing this offense. He was helping to push them back pretty much every single drive, and that continued into the 4th quarter. We're now up 21. Bobby was dominating this line of scrimmage, causing a sack forced fumble that got taken to the crib for 6, giving LSU a now insurmountable lead and doing enough to give them their first win of the season. The Tigers go on to dominate their opponents 31-0, and the Waterboy had an incredible day with 9 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks, just pretty much annihilating his opponents all afternoon, and Coach Klein was happy with what he was seeing. Because with the Tigers, Bobby was now earning his first SEC Defensive Player of the Week. Coach Klein even told Bobby that if he keeps this up, he might have a chance to win a Heisman. And that would be really cool to Bobby, but for now, he's just trying to help his team stay on track and keep winning games throughout the season. And soon LSU would be heading into another home game with another chance to come up with a win. But first, they would have to take care of business in the rain against New Mexico State. Now, on the opening drive of this game, Bobby was out there chasing around this quarterback and eventually brought him down in the backfield, sacking him on a 3rd down that really seemed to set the tone for his team going forward. Because soon LSU was coming up with stops all throughout the first half. And it wouldn't be long before Bobby was tossing this lineman out the way and combining for his 2nd sack of the night. a drive killer that seemed to be doing a little bit of foreshadowing for New Mexico State. Cause soon they would be down 41-0, and Bobby Boucher was still not messing around. He absolutely lit this dude up and forced a fumble that gave his team the ball back, leading us to a 51-0 game where Bobby just could not stop making plays. He brought this quarterback down to the ground for the second time of the night. And after another excellent performance, he earns his team their second win of the season. A dominant 51-point shutout that Coach Klein and Bobby would actually celebrate with Mama. These three are basically a family at this point. And with Mama now being very supportive of Bobby playing football, he was in the right mindset to go ahead and continue to be great throughout the year, especially as he was heading into his next home game, this time against Louisville. Now Bobby would start this game off right with a hit on the QB in the backfield for a loss. Now this would not count as a sack as it was a designed QB run, but this one would, as Bobby gets home to the QB in the first quarter, derailing an early drive for them, and also putting that quarterback in a lot of pain. Unfortunately, this did not deter Louisville from continuing to try to make something happen, as they would eventually get downfield in the red zone, bringing us to a 1st and goal at the end of the half where the running back got loose and got across the goal line for a score, tying this game up at 7 before Louisville gets the ball with great field position in the second half, and their running back was outrunning Bobby to the end zone for his second score of the day. Luckily though, LSU was able to tie this game up at 14, and the defense was able to barely come up with the stop at the end to send this game to overtime. And with a bunch of NFL scouts watching from the stands, Bobby and this entire LSU defense knew that they had to come up with something big. They were now up by a touchdown in overtime, but Louisville was trying to tie this game back up, bringing us to a 1st and 10 where Louisville was looking for a score and threw a pick instead. An interception for the Tigers in overtime allowed them to come away with a win in this game. They closed this one out 21-14, and the entire team was elated after the game. But with Bobby playing so well and looking real excited to be on his new team, he had a lot of reporters wondering where his happiness is coming from this year.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Now, although LSU was the 6th ranked team in the country, they were currently in 7th place in the SEC. So they knew going into this next game against Florida that they would have to keep winning, but the Gators were making it real difficult early on. Bobby was struggling in this game as he had no sacks, but he was out here saying shablaka, just knocking people's heads off and instilling fear in his opponent's heart, which is probably why soon his defense was able to come up with a sack-forced fumble that Bobby recovered. A huge play that gives the ball back to LSU here in the 3rd quarter and allows them a chance to extend the lead. Now, unfortunately, that did not happen, so Bobby had to take matters into his own hands by coming up with a sack on 3rd down, putting an end to this drive as he finally gets his first sack of the day. And at this point, it seems like the Florida offense was petrified to get down the field because by the end of this game, they still only had 7 points, bringing us to a 4th down and 3 where they decided to run the ball, and although Bobby missed his tackle, the ball carrier would be brought to the ground inbounds with Florida having no timeouts. And with them not having enough time to get this snap off, LSU was coming up with a big win on the road. They take down a fellow SEC opponent to move them to 4-1 on the season, and it seems like they're feeling pretty good as they look ahead at the rest of the schedule, and especially as they were now heading back home to match up against one of the worst teams in the SEC, with the Tigers ready to take on Vanderbilt. Now, the Waterboy being added to this team makes a world of difference for this defense, because him just being out there on the field makes opposing quarterbacks so scared that they're often throwing picks and turning the ball over. And in this one, it allowed LSU to be up by 2 possessions after half, all while Bobby was still leaving his mark on this game. But by the 4th quarter, Vanderbilt still had a chance to win. Well, at least until the running back started talking crazy about Bobby.
Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
Bobby Boucher was knocking this dude into next week, where hopefully they would have a better chance at coming away with the win, because this week, LSU was coming up with the victory, just barely beating out their SEC opponent in a game where Bobby had 13 total tackles, 3 of them going for tackles for loss. And despite him playing well lately, he made sure to give credit to Coach Klein and the rest of the Tigers coaching staff because he knows that they've allowed him to evolve a lot this year. Bobby Boucher was a much better player than he was in his sophomore year, and he was looking to continue to prove it heading into his next game, where he and the Tigers would be on the road to face off against another SEC opponent, the Texas A&M Aggies. Now, to start this game off, the Tigers defense was strapping up A&M. At one point, they had him backed up against their own goal line before Bobby had chased around this running back before he was brought down in the end zone for what I believe is the first safety of the year for LSU. And by the end of the first half, Bobby was finding a way to come up with his first pass breakup of the year. You know, although Bobby had no sacks yet, he was still having a pretty good game. And it would get even better after he said "Wang" as Bobby Boucher comes up with a pick. And he was easily able to take this one to the crib for his first score of the season. Not only doing enough to extend LSU's lead, but doing enough to give them another W on the season. Bobby Boucher and this LSU defense was absolutely on fire. And the more national attention that Bobby got, the more people wanted to see his face. He was signing a ton of NIL deals and was doing a lot of interviews on TV.
Tell me, what is your secret? How do you find yourself in the right position all the time?
What I'll do is I'll start tackling the quarterback unless he get the ball to somebody else, in which case I'll try to tackle that person.
Gentlemen, which brings me to my next point. Don't smoke crack.
But you see, Bobby wasn't letting any of the attention get to his head. He knew that LSU had a long season ahead of them, and just one more loss could potentially put them out of the college football playoffs. So he made sure to be as locked in as he could going into his next game on the road against South Carolina. Now, this was actually another game where the Tigers were dominating their opponent in the first quarter, coming up with a sack here that puts an end to their opening drive. But by the end of the quarter, things would change as South Carolina was taking advantage of great field position and getting across the goal line to tie this game up at 7. And as South Carolina had some momentum, they would try to keep it going here in the second quarter, but they would end up getting stopped on third down, leading to a 17-7 ball game. And on this play, Bobby was looking to come up with a regular old stop on third down, but then the defense broke through, causing a sack force fumble that Bobby would recover in the end zone. The Waterboy comes up with another touchdown on the season, and it not only puts them up by 3 possessions, but gives them tons of momentum in the second half. Because eventually Bobby would come out here and get his first sack of the day. And at this point, he was really setting the tone for LSU because soon they would be up 31-10. And after Bobby sheds off the center on this play and gets to the quarterback one more time, he helps LSU win another game on the road. Closing this one out 31-24, and Bobby was happy after, not just because he had a good game, but because he was spending a lot more time with Vicky Valancourt and they were getting very serious. But the only thing he was more serious about than Vicky Valancourt was getting W's on the field, which is exactly what he planned to do heading into his next game at home against Ole Miss. Now, throughout the first quarter of this game, things were going well for Bobby, especially after he came up with a sack-forced fumble that he actually found a way to recover. And I think it's safe to say that the fans were happy with what they were seeing from Bobby.
Waterboys killing him! Best tackler I've seen since Joe Montana.
Joe Montana was a quarterback, you idiot.
I said Joe Montana.
Now, it turns out that Bobby was not done there as he came up with his second sack of the day at the end of the half, bringing us to a couple plays later where Bobby wanted to prove that he was more than just a pass rusher by snagging his ball out the air. He picks this ball off to take points off the board for Ole Miss before half. And at this point, he is already having a great game, but he continues to derail this offense in the third quarter, coming up with his third sack of the day, which eventually brings us to the fourth, which is where Bobby would actually get his fourth sack of the day. And after closing out another win on the season, Bobby comes up with another National Defensive Player of the Week, closing the game out with 6 TFLs, an interception, and 4 sacks, one of which was a forced fumble. And it turns out that Bobby was playing so great that he was now in the Heisman race. Bobby had a chance to do something that's never been done before at LSU. But with another big game coming up, Coach Klein needed Bobby to do exactly what he's been doing all year. And Bobby did a great job reassuring Coach that he would get the job done.
Coach, not only will I do it for you, yes, I'll do it for you.
Because now LSU is heading into the toughest game on their schedule. They are about to match up against the number 2 team in the nation, and with their college football playoff hopes still alive, they will have to take care of business against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, on the first play of the game, Bobby Boucher sheds off the center and sacks the quarterback down to the ground, coming up with a big play to begin this game and really set the tone for the team going forward. Well, at least on defense, they were able to come up with a stop that forces Alabama to punt. Unfortunately, though, Alabama still scores a touchdown. And on the following drive, they were doing a much better job getting downfield into scoring range, bringing us to a 3rd and goal where Bobby Boucher lights this man up, just obliterating the running back to hold Alabama to 3. But unfortunately, they would be put right back in the same position. And with LSU pretty much having their backs up against the wall, Bobby knew he had to do something. So he decided to smack this running back in the backfield and force a fumble, creating a turnover that allowed LSU to gain some momentum and have this game tied by the 4th quarter, bringing us to a 3rd down and 11 where Alabama was taking a deep shot that fell incomplete. Unfortunately, they would take the lead by 3, but Bobby and his defense were trying to come up with a play. But by the end of this game, Alabama's offense was looking too strong, and it didn't seem like there was anything LSU could do. Which brings us to a third down where this game was on the line. And if Bobby wanted any chance of helping his team win, he would have to say, Wang! Bobby Boucher is making a play, coming up with an interception that completely reverses field for LSU. And you know what, man? Bobby had to make sure that he wasn't dreaming or nothing because he cannot believe that he is doing this at the highest level. But oh yeah, Bobby really doing it. The Waterboy just strapped up Alabama and gave LSU their biggest win of the season. LSU was barely able to escape this game, and it couldn't have been done without another miraculous performance from Bobby Boucher. This dude was looking like a superhero in this game, coming up with one of the clutchest plays of his career. And Coach Klein was definitely happy about it because at this point, Bobby was definitely on pace to win a bunch of defensive awards at the end of the year. He has won a pretty good amount of National Defensive Players of the Week so far this season. And he was looking to earn it again after heading into Arkansas's house and coming up with not just 1 or 2 or 3, but 4 sacks in this game, leading to yet another LSU W. And it was actually after this game where Bobby would find out that he broke the all-time career record for sacks. He now stood alone at the top of the record books with 47. But as great as this was, he was still looking to add more. And against Oklahoma, it wouldn't be to the fourth quarter where Bobby would finally do so, coming up with another sack in a game that LSU was leading by multiple possessions. And soon Bobby was out there coming up with another sack to finally put an end to the regular season. They finished their final game on the schedule with a multiple possession win against the top 25 ranked team. And in a season where Bobby had pretty much terrorized every quarterback he faced, it wasn't a surprise that he was not only a huge fan favorite, but he also now had better odds at potentially winning a Heisman. Where currently it looks like some of Coach Redboy youth players might win it, but that's not really important to Bobby. Because right now Bobby knows that he's about to head into the biggest game of his life. Bobby Boucher has to find a way to lock in and take down the best team that he's faced off against all season. Because in the SEC Championship, the LSU Tigers are matching up against the #1 team in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now on this opening drive, LSU's defense was playing very well. They even held Georgia to a 3rd down and 12 before Bobby snagged this ball out the air. Bobby Boucher was on his way to the end zone for a touchdown. He is putting up points on the first drive of this game. And we're hoping that it means that LSU has a ton of momentum going forward. But you see, Bobby didn't get too hyped right there because he knows that he's playing against Georgia. They were the #1 team in the nation for a reason, so he was not surprised that they found themselves down at the goal line, eventually bringing them to a 3rd down where this defense came up with a big stop in the backfield, eventually allowing this game to be at 14-3 by the end of the 2nd quarter. But with Georgia out here still pretty much slicing up this defense, soon they would find themselves back into scoring range, bringing us to a 2nd down where Bobby was playing good coverage but his defense wasn't, and allowed Georgia to score some points that brings them back in this game. And even though LSU would actually score a touchdown to extend their lead, Georgia would find themselves right back downfield where they put up some more points, officially putting this game at 21-17 after half, and Bobby Boucher was out here doing everything he could to give his team the ball back. He came up with multiple tackles for loss in his drive to push Georgia back, eventually bringing us to a 4th down and goal where it seems like he inspired his teammates because one of them come up with a sack, the 2nd sack of the day for the team that gives the offense the ball back, where unfortunately they could not do anything with it. And now all of a sudden, with less than 2 minutes left, Georgia was moving right back into scoring range, eventually getting inside the red zone on a 4th and 3 where Bobby almost came up with this pick. Instead, Georgia moves right to the goal line, and with around a minute left, a touchdown would pretty much put this game away. But it turns out that Bobby Boucher was coming up with a pick, and he had nobody around him as he was gliding towards the end zone for a 98-yard touchdown. The Waterboy makes a huge play in the SEC Championship that not only gives them the win, but sends LSU to the college football playoffs. Because after taking down the #1 team in the nation, LSU is bound to have a 1st-round bye. A bye week that they likely would not have been able to get without Bobby Boucher having an incredible game, earning himself another SEC and National Defensive Player of the Week for I don't even know, bro. Bobby Boucher is breaking my brain with his level of play. And it's probably why he went on to go win the Walter Camp Award after having 61 tackles for loss on the season. He had no idea that all season long he was on the verge of making history, and that eventually he would go on to be the first linebacker ever to win the Heisman Trophy, officially establishing himself as the overall #1 player in the country. Bobby Boucher was absolutely different. The college football world has never seen anything like this before, and they likely will never see anything like it again. And at this point, many people consider the Waterboy to be the greatest defensive player in the history of college football. But the crazy thing is that the season is still not over yet for Bobby. And although Bobby has made history individually, he and his team have an opportunity to make some history of their own, as the LSU Tigers are now heading into their first playoff game, where they will be matched up against the only team that they've lost to all season. So they are now more than ready to face off against the USC Trojans. Now this game was at 7-0 pretty much all throughout the entire first half, at least until USC would score a touchdown to tie it up at 7. But playing against a team that Bobby knew had given LSU a loss, he was not messing around, coming up with a sack here that he thought would derail USC's drive, but soon they would actually find themselves down by the goal line. And after a play that brings him inside the 5, soon we'd come to a 4th down, where Bobby was looking to blitz but abandons his zone. It allows the easy touchdown that ties this game up at 14, sending this one to overtime, where LSU not only had the lead, but they had USC on a 3rd down and long, and still they would find a way to give up a touchdown. USC was giving this defense a ton of problems that they did not face all throughout the year. And eventually, USC would go right down the field and score a touchdown, taking the lead in double overtime. Now, luckily, LSU's defense was able to come up with a stop on the 2-point conversion, which allowed the offense an opportunity to go downfield, potentially score a touchdown, and win this game, as the LSU Tiger offense does what the Texas Longhorn offense could not do for Bobby all last year. They come up incredibly clutch in the biggest game of the season, coming up with a touchdown and 2-point conversion that not only wins them the Sugar Bowl, but sends them into what's possibly the biggest game of the year for other reasons. Because now Bobby Boucher and Coach Klein are heading into a matchup where they know they got to take care of business. They are about to face off against the coach and a team that sabotaged their previous season. So Bobby and Coach Klein are completely locked in as they head into their next playoff game against Coach Red Boy U and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, early on, Ohio State was looking good, and it was pretty tough for Ohio State to stop them. It was looking like the Buckeyes were going to go right down the field and score before the quarterback got sacked. And Bobby Boucher was right there to recover the fumble, and just like that, he was gone. Bobby Boucher took this one to the crib to make it a 14-point ball game. And from there, it seemed like LSU had a ton of momentum on their side, because soon after, Bobby was finding a way to come up with his first sack of the game. A big one that pushed Ohio State well behind the sticks. But soon Bobby and his defense would realize that they were playing against one of the best teams in the nation, as Ohio State would take this ball around the edge and come up with a big score that puts them down by only 7 points. But although this Ohio State offense was starting to put in some work, this defense was doing a pretty good job of responding well by holding them to 3 points, bringing this one to a 21-10 ball game where Ohio State would really start getting things going, making some plays that ultimately brought them down to the goal line. And after Bobby came out here and got tossed aside in the backfield, Ohio State was putting up another score to put this game at 1 possession. But it didn't stop there, as Ohio State would get the ball back, and Coach Red Boy U found a way to coach his team up and get them back in the end zone for another score, taking the lead in the 4th quarter of this game. Now, luckily, LSU did find a way to tie this game up, which gave Bobby a chance to come out here and chase around this quarterback for a sack. Now, unfortunately, this would not matter, as Ohio State still would drive down the field. But after this play where Bobby Boucher would actually get taken out of the game, Ohio State would miss the game-winning field goal. And after a 29-yard reception from LSU, they were able to send themselves to the National Championship, coming up with a huge win at the last second against Coach Red Boy U in Ohio State. This one might have been the game of the year for Bobby for many reasons, but mostly because his team was able to once again take down his old coach. And he had put up an incredible performance in the process, as he had 8 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks, doing enough to send his team to the final game of the season, where after an incredible college career, Bobby knows that this might be his last game. So he realizes that he has to do everything he can to play at his very best, and he feels like he might need to in order to come up with a win in the national championship against Louisville. Now, to start this game, Louisville was proving that they were not to be messed around with, and this misplay from Bobby results in a huge gain downfield that turns into a touchdown, putting Louisville up by 7 before LSU would take a 10-7 lead after half, where it seems like LSU's defense was starting to play a little bit better by coming up with some stops, eventually allowing LSU to have a 2-possession lead before they pick off a pass, creating a turnover that puts this offense in great position to extend their lead, which eventually they do. We're now up 24-7. Bobby came up with his first sack of this national championship game. He was contributing to this team, dominating throughout the second half, eventually bringing us to the end of the fourth quarter where this defense got another pick, locking up this Louisville defense for the last time of the night. And now Coach Klein and Bobby Boucher have finally done enough to win a national championship. After an incredible journey to 3 different colleges, these two are finally on top of the college football world. They had finally done it. With the help of Bobby Boucher, who, I don't know why he's all the way back there, LSU wins a national championship. And after an incredible season where Bobby had led the league in multiple major categories on defense, including tackles, tackles for loss, and sacks, it turns out that he would not only break some career records, but his season was so immaculate that he went on to break the all-time single-season record for sacks, not only finishing his season as a national champion, but one of, if not the best defensive player in the history of college football. And after having such an incredible year, man, Bobby and Coach Klein have no idea what they want to do. They could either stay at LSU, head to a new team, or Bobby could actually enter his name into the NFL draft. Which brings us to today, where Bobby Boucher has some decisions to make on his future in football. He could either stay at LSU, transfer to a new school, or potentially take his talents to the NFL. But after taking some time to talk over it with Mama, Bobby decided that he's gonna go back to school and get his education. And around that same time, he was actually getting married to his girlfriend, Vicky. So everything was going great for Bobby, but then all of a sudden,
Bobby, it's me, your daddy, Roberto. You know, I seen you on the ESPN when they was talking about you being drafted by the NFL.
Bobby's daddy showed up and made him realize that he could make a lot more money in the NFL. So after talking about it with Mama again and Vicky, Bobby Boucher finally makes a decision on his future.
I'm gonna go do it. This is the best day of my life.
And now Bobby Boucher, after having an immaculate college career, he decides that he has done everything that he could possibly do in college, and it's time for him to start playing at the next level. But first, Bobby is working on what kind of player he's going to be once he gets to the league. And it looks like he's going to end up as a blitzing linebacker comparable to guys like Patrick Queen. But something tells me he'll be better than Patrick Queen. Now at this point, Bobby is just ready to get things going with the NFL Combine. And the first drill that he is doing out here is a 40-yard dash where he ends up running a 4.33. Easily one of the fastest linebackers in the draft and probably one of the fastest players overall. Now it turns out that Bobby would actually dominate this combine. And you know what, I'm just realizing that Bobby put on a ton of muscle. So I think that, along with the fact that he had put on an amazing combine performance, is probably why he's projected to be a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. But before Bobby gets to the draft, he has to take care of these combine interviews. And he's doing a pretty good job answering questions from NFL GMs. It's looking like these GMs are liking what they're hearing from Bobby, and he feels confident now that he is officially heading into the NFL draft. Now Bobby knows no matter where he goes, he'll likely end up playing halfway across the country. The good news is that he would find out soon after he was finally getting a call from the New Orleans Saints. It turns out that Bobby Boucher wasn't going to have to go anywhere, because with the 5th pick in the NFL draft, the New Orleans Saints were taking Bobby Boucher, who they were bringing in to help make the Saints a competitive team again and potentially lead them to their 2nd Super Bowl championship. Now, after officially signing with the New Orleans Saints, Bobby is ready to get things going as he heads into his rookie season. In training camp, he was looking like a guy who could be a real playmaker, and the coaches were liking what they were seeing. But now that Bobby's in the NFL, he has a lot more responsibility, because some of his weekly activities now consist of him having to make a choice between spending time with the fans or spending more time with his new wife. And based on what he chooses, he'll be able to build up his sphere of influence, which you guys can see Coach Klein, Mama, and Vicky are all at the top. But eventually, it is now time for Bobby to make his NFL preseason debut, where he's going to play a couple snaps here against the Chargers. Now, unsurprisingly for many people, it did not take long for Bobby Boucher to start making an impact. He was already showing what his capabilities could be as a run defender. But on the same drive, he showed that opposing teams will have a hard time passing against him as well, as he helps combine for his first career sack to put an end to this drive. And you know what, man, the coaches had already seen enough, bro. They are taking Bobby out, and they already know that he's going to end up being a major part of this team. Now, in the second preseason game, Bobby actually wasn't playing at all. So that made him even more confused when after the game he found out that he would actually not be the starter. 76-year-old Demario Davis will maintain his spot, but Bobby made it clear that he's still going to come out here and compete for this job. He came out here in the final preseason game against the Broncos where he helped combine for another sack. and that's really all he could get done before eventually being taken out for the rest of the game once again, and after Bobby was now having another talk with his head coach Kellen Moore about Bobby continuing to compete for the starting job. And Bobby reiterates that he is not here to sit on the sidelines. So even though Bobby knew that he wasn't going to be a starter to begin the season, he continued to work hard in practice doing all sorts of crazy drills like this one, and showed the coaches that he was willing to work for a starting job eventually. But it was clear that Bobby was not happy coming off the bench going into his first NFL game, where at home against the Cardinals, he is finally making his NFL debut halfway through the third quarter. That was kind of crazy because as soon as Bobby got in, Kyler Murray was looking so petrified that he forgot to snap the ball, causing an early flag in his possession, and Bobby Boucher is already making an impact. A couple plays later, the Saints defense brings them to a 3rd down and 2, where they come up with a stop, and they would have another chance to get a stop here, having the Cardinals backed up against their own goal line. And now Bobby felt like it might be time for him to make a play by saying, "Wang!" Bobby Boucher smacked the shit out of James Conner, and he gave the Saints all the momentum to come up with the win, but it's too bad that they don't. The Cardinals take the win in the first game of the season by 1 point, but Bobby was not too upset, because now Kellen Moore was giving Bobby the chance to become the starter. He liked what he did last game, and he knows that he's only just going to keep improving. And eventually they'd be ready to get back into another home game at the Superdome. The New Orleans Saints have a chance to get their first win of the season. But the question is, will they be able to do it against the San Francisco 49ers, who are already talking crazy to Bobby on the first play of the game?
Bring it to the hole! You're a smart! Woo! Woo! Woo!
He sound like a big choo-choo train. Powerbomb. Compliments of Captain Insano.
Bobby Boucher was stupefying CMC like he was in Harry Potter. But that was only the beginning for Bobby and his defense as they dominate the 49ers on this opening possession. And really all throughout the first half, they continued to come up with stops on 3rd down. And even when 4th down came around, the Niners offense had a hard time dealing with the Saints pass rush. Bringing this to the 4th quarter where the Saints are up 21 points, and Bobby is helping to put a stop to this play with a tackle for loss. But even though the Niners did eventually go downfield and put some points up on the board, it was a little too late for all that because the Saints were sending them back home to the Bay, getting a 21-7 W here led by Bobby Boucher in the Saints defense. And with the Waterboy improving so much since he's got to the Saints, his teammates are already wanting him to become a leader. And of course Bobby's going to be ready for that after he just led his team to a national championship as the best player in the country. Now Bobby's just taking care of some of his weekly activities and upgrading some of his pass rush moves because he still hasn't even come up with a sack yet on his career. He's had a few TFLs, but he'll definitely be chasing a sack in his next game, where the first time all season the Saints will be traveling on the road to face off against the 12th man and the Seattle Seahawks. Now early on, even though Bobby was shedding off blockers, the Seahawks were still coming up with big plays. Eventually though, the Saints bring him to a 3rd down where they come up with a stop, holding the Seahawks to 3 points on the drive. By the end of the 3rd quarter, this game is still tied at 3, but the Seahawks are challenging to change that by moving themselves well within field goal range, and Bobby actually picks up his first flag in the NFL, taking us to a 3rd down and 11 where the Saints would bring down Sam Darnold again. A big play that holds them to 3 points, but they still had the lead by the next drive. So Bobby now knew that it was time to start making some plays to help his team. And on back-to-back plays, he was stopping this running back for a loss, allowing his team to get the ball back with the chance to take the lead in the final moments of the game. But unfortunately, they could not pick up any points, and the Saints would lose another game on the season. Bobby was starting to realize that his offense was kind of garbage, so that meant that he had to be even better. And in order to do so, he decided to call up his now good friend, Captain Insano. He had to learn some moves from him and figure out what it is he can do to be better, because going into their next game, they will be on the road once again. This time facing off against one of the best teams in the league though, as they will be traveling on the road to take on Josh Allen and the Bills. Now early on in this game, Bobby and the Saints defense was chasing around Josh Allen and coming up with a sack, putting a stop to them on their opening drive and allowing the Saints to go up by 7 points. Now Bobby was out here still trying to come up with his first sack, but it seems like everybody else was making plays before him. Shout out Isaac Yauda. Eventually though, the Bills would find a way to get themselves in field goal range twice before the half, bringing us to a 10-6 ball game in the second half where apparently Josh Allen is unguardable. He is bringing this ball well across field into scoring position for the Bills. The Saints again would bring them to another 3rd down where Bobby's pass rush was creating some pressure, forcing a wild throw that ends up falling incomplete, bringing us to a 10-9 ball game where the Saints are struggling to put up more points. And it's looking like that's not going to be a problem for the Bills as Josh Allen is taking this ball all the way to the crib for a touchdown, finally giving the Bills the lead, and they would maintain it until late in the 4th quarter, where after failing to stop Josh Allen again on this 3rd down, this game looked like it was about to be over. The Bills were running down the clock and were about to put this one away until Bobby Boucher forces a fumble that is recovered by the Saints, forcing a fumble that gives his team a chance to take the lead, which they eventually do. Unfortunately though, this Bills offense is still operating at a high level, and they got themselves into field goal range to tie this game up and send it into overtime, where after Bobby had obliterated this Bills running back on back-to-back plays, he was giving his team a chance to win the game, but unfortunately they couldn't. The good thing is though, neither could the Bills, and this one would end up in a tie. This one would end 18-18 of the game, where Bobby had probably his best performance of the season. 15 tackles and 5 tackles for loss was starting to turn him into a household name. So much so to the point where his daddy decided to reach out again and try and convince Bobby to become business partners.
Take the money! You and me could be partners, just like that Tiger Woods and his daddy.
Now, of course, Bobby chose to spend some time with Mama, but he also chose to work on his skills. He was hoping that this would be a game where he came up with his first sack, and he would have a good chance to do so going against one of the worst offensive lines in the league with the New York Giants. Now, it took until the second quarter, but Bobby Boucher would start making his impact felt, helping his defense bring the Giants to a third down where they would eventually come up with a stop. It would take until the end of the third quarter for the Giants to get down the field and put some points up to tie this game up at 7. But by the end of this game, Bobby was destroying this offensive line, and he and the Saints defense were chasing around Jameis Winston for a sack. A huge play in front of the home crowd that gives the Saints their second win of the season, closing this one out 10-7 against the Giants in another game where Bobby had dominated. Bobby was getting used to filling up the stat sheet, and he looked to do the same thing here against the Patriots as he came up with his first full sack of his career. Bobby was taking down Drake May to try and set the tone for the team going forward, but somehow all that did was just really set the tone for New England, because they were having no problem making their way downfield, bringing us to a first down and 10 where an inside run up the middle somehow allows Antonio Gibson to make his way to the end zone for a score, giving New England a lead that they would maintain and even add to here in the first half. Soon though, Bobby is out here really doing his part to try and get his team back in position to take the lead, but there was really nothing Bobby can do when the secondary was getting cooked up like some eggs at a hibachi restaurant, and allowed the Patriots back into scoring territory where after Drake May rolls out to his right on this play, they come up with a touchdown to extend their lead further. And even though the Saints did put up some points, it definitely wasn't enough, especially as the Pats would score another touchdown, doing enough to hand the Saints another loss on the season, dropping this one 31-17, and the Saints knew that they had to start stringing together some wins, especially if they wanted any chance at competing in the playoffs. Unfortunately though, it looks like this next game will be a tough one to compete in, as the Saints are now traveling to Chicago in some treacherous weather, where they will be facing off against the Bears. Now this was a game where Bobby Boucher was dominating all throughout the first half. The Bears didn't seem ready to play in their own weather, and the Waterboy was taking advantage of it by taking Caleb Williams down for a sack. Now Bobby would continue to make his impact felt here in the second half. Even when the Bears got down to the goal line, the Waterboy was handing out free CTE like some candy on Halloween, bringing us to a second down and 9 where Bobby throws off the center and sacks Caleb Williams for the second time in the game, ultimately leading to a 4th down and 16 where the Saints would come up with the stop and get themselves back in the win column. They come out with a 17-5 victory, and Bobby Boucher was the talk of the football world. It got to the point where Coach Redboy U at Ohio State couldn't even believe what he was seeing. So he realized that he might have to start plotting again to get his revenge on Bobby Boucher. But that's going to be tough to do so based on how the Saints have been feeling. They know that with Bobby Boucher leading their defense, they have a chance to make a run in the playoffs.
You can do it!
We're here in a game against the Tampa Bay Bucks where Bobby Boucher is once again making plays to help his team out. And in a game where neither team was able to put up more than one touchdown, Bobby was out here making the game-saving tackle, allowing his team to come up with another win to put them over 500 on the season. They took down a divisional opponent, but soon they will be facing off against one of the best teams in the NFC West, where the Saints will be on the road to face off against Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Now, unfortunately, this game felt a lot more different than any other game Bobby had played throughout the season. This Rams offense was high-flying and was torching the Saints offense early, bringing us to the end of the second quarter where the Rams already had the lead, but they continued to add to it by scoring another touchdown. And even by the second half, it didn't seem like there was much this Saints defense can do as Kyren Williams was smacking a defender, getting in for another touchdown that put his team up by 2 possessions, but Bobby made sure to get his revenge by smacking him right back. Unfortunately though, this was just a game where that Rams offense was dominating all throughout, and by the end of this one, they were coming up with a 21-13 victory, handing the Saints another loss on the season in a game where Bobby was pretty much neutralized all throughout. Easily his worst performance of the year so far. But as far as his stats throughout the year, Bobby had been playing incredible. When comparing what he has done throughout the season to his teammates' entire career, Bobby looks like he's on pace to have a spectacular season. He just has to pick things back up as he heads into another game against a division rival, as they will be heading to Charlotte to face off against the Carolina Panthers. Now this game was tied at 0 into the second half, which is where Bobby actually comes up with his first sack of the day. A big play that might be able to give his team some momentum going forward, and he continued to build on that momentum by sacking Bryce Young again on third down, putting an end to the Panthers' drive and hopefully allowing the Saints to take the lead, but they do not. Once again though, it is Bobby making plays in the backfield to help push his opponent behind the sticks, bringing us to a third down where the Panthers actually find a way to move the sticks, bringing them into field goal range. But here on another third down, Bobby comes up with his third sack of the day. He figured that might be enough to push Carolina out of field goal range, but this is where he knew for sure that he is not in college anymore, because the kickers at this level can make these kicks, and the Panthers definitely did to take a 3-0 victory. This is one of the most disappointing losses in the season for the Saints, as they failed to put up a single point. And it was in another game where Bobby put up an incredible performance, having 2.5 sacks and 4 TFLs. But you know what, Bobby was still working with his defensive coordinator to figure out what they can do to be better, because at this point in the year, it does not look like they have a chance to make the playoffs. But the Saints are going to have to try and find a way to turn things around as they head into the back half of their season, starting right here in another home game against the Falcons. Now early on, it looks like the Falcons are going to run all over the Saints, because after Bijan Robinson shrugs off Bobby Boucher, he finds a way to get around the edge and get in the end zone for a score, seemingly setting the tone for Atlanta. But by the second half, this game would be 17-14 with the Saints leading. And this is where Bobby would begin to make his impact with his first sack of the day, ultimately helping his team get to a 2-possession lead in the fourth quarter, where this pass rush seemed to be just too much for the Falcons, with the Saints now picking up their 4th sack of the game and also picking up their 5th win of the season. The Saints were taking care of business against the division rival, but they had to stay locked in if they wanted to do the same thing going into Miami to take on the Dolphins. Against Miami, Bobby and his defense were dominating throughout the first half, as Bobby comes up with his first sack of the game to push the Dolphins back, but it wouldn't be long after where Miami came up with a play to get them across the goal line and tie this game up at 7. And now all of a sudden it seems like Tua feels comfortable talking trash to Bobby.
Ooh, I'm a football player.
Bobby was coming up with a huge play to stop the Dolphins and send this game to overtime. Where with the Dolphins now backed up against their own goal line, it was actually Cameron Jordan coming up with a game-winning safety to give the Saints their 2nd straight win, closing this one out 9-7, and Bobby felt great about getting into the rest of the season. Because at this point in the year, the Saints have a playoff spot, but all they have to do is just keep winning. But they would have to find a way to do so going against the 7-5 Buccaneers on the road. Now, although the Waterboy does rush the passer a lot, he can still come out here and say "Wang" as he comes up with his first career interception to start this game off. A huge turnover that puts the Saints up 7 and sets the tone for them going forward, bringing us to a 3rd down and 4 here where the Bucs are responding right back with a big play. They take this one all the way upfield for a touchdown to tie this game up. But by the second quarter, Bobby was out here saying "shablaka" to these running backs, and all of a sudden Tampa Bay's offense was scared to move the ball downfield even into the 4th quarter, because Bobby was beginning to live in their backfield until the Saints had a 2-possession lead in the 4th quarter, where even though Baker Mayfield would find Mike Evans over the middle, who somehow made a play and outran the entire defense for a touchdown, it wasn't going to be enough to make up for the deficit, as the Saints would take their 3rd straight victory, closing this one out 17-14 in another solid game from Bobby Boucher, who was continuing to have an amazing rookie season for the Saints, and he wanted to keep it up heading into another game against Carolina. But early on, it looks like the Panthers are going to be a problem once again for New Orleans, as they score a long touchdown to take a 7-0 lead. Now, Bobby was doing his best to come up with stops for the Saints though, putting a great move on this offensive lineman before bringing down Bryce Young, coming up with his first sack of the night here in the 2nd quarter, and eventually in the second half, he was bringing down Bryce Young again. It looked like the Saints were about to come away with the win in this game, especially after Bobby comes up with his 3rd sack of the day. He was dominating this Panthers offense, yet somehow on his 2nd down and 16, Bryce would find a way to get out of the pocket and make a play that brought his team into field goal range, putting them in position to come up with a 10-7 victory, as the Saints now moved to 7-6-1 on the season, despite Bobby having one of his best games of his career. He was even being congratulated by his agent for winning Defensive Player of the Week. And that was nice and all, but it was more important that the Saints get back on track and keep themselves in the playoff race by coming up with a win against the Jets. Now, throughout the season, one thing Bobby was learning how to do was time the snap and come up with tackles in the backfield. He was becoming a defensive menace for teams, and especially Justin Fields. Oh my God, Bobby Boucher knocked his lights out. But he wasn't done there, because soon after, Bobby was coming up with a sack before half to stop the Jets from putting up another 3 points. And then after half, Bobby was obliterating this lineman before helping to bring down Justin again. He was an absolute problem for the Jets all throughout this game, and even into the 4th quarter, where he's coming up with his third sack of the night. Bobby Boucher has to pinch himself just to make sure he isn't dreaming, because he almost can't believe that he is dominating the Jets to this level. Bringing us to a 2nd and 7 where for the third time this season, the Saints are coming up with a safety, as Pete Werner comes up with a sack to give the Saints the lead, and just like that, they are back in the win column. They take a disgusting 5-3 victory, but a win is a win. And led by the Waterboy, who had another great game, the Saints have clinched a playoff spot, solidifying themselves as the winner of the division with only 2 games left. And just like that, the Saints are back to being a competitive team. So everything was going great for Bobby until he would eventually find out that Coach Red Boy U had gotten himself into the NFL as a defensive coordinator. He was officially part of the Rams coaching staff, where he was already taking his revenge on Bobby, because it turns out that Coach Red Boy U would locate Bobby Boucher's #1 fan. And after making some phone calls, he found a way to take him out for good. And soon Bobby had to make a choice between going to an interview or going to his fan's funeral. Now Bobby not only chose to go to the funeral, but he also dedicated the rest of his season to this guy. Now Bobby doesn't know how or why he died, but he does know that he's going to lock in and help close out the regular season for the Saints. Now the Tennessee Titans were absolutely no match for the Saints defense, as Bobby was lighting them up all throughout the first half, taking us to the 4th quarter where the Titans still had 0 points, and it was about to stay that way as the Saints took a 14-0 victory. The Saints were on their way to a 10-win season, but all they had to do now was just take down the Falcons, who unfortunately was making it difficult early on as they take a 14-0 lead in the first half. The Saints were down so bad that they decided to put Bobby out there at cornerback, and Bobby actually was playing pretty good coverage and even came up with a pick. Bobby Boucher was locking down his opponent and gave his team some life. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough though, as the Saints would close out their season with a 14-6 loss. Definitely not the way they wanted to end their regular season, but the good thing is that they will still make the playoffs, and they had Bobby Boucher to lead them into it and help them get to the 2nd round. Because after a season where Bobby had 54 tackles for loss, 18.5 sacks, and 2 interceptions, he had easily established himself as one of the best defensive players in the league. And that's why going into his first ever playoff game, he had the Superdome rocking. He was playing so well that he even had Tyrann Mathieu come out of retirement and help the Saints make something happen on their playoff journey. These Saints fans were looking to see greatness, and being led by Bobby Boucher, they had a chance to be great as they were matching up against the Rams. Now on the very first play of this game, Bobby tries to time up the snap before throwing off this running back and bringing Matt Stafford down to the ground. A huge play from the Waterboy, but Matthew Stafford didn't seem to like it and started talking crazy to Bobby.
Look at me! I'm the Waterboy, dude! I got a wooden spoon, dude!
Bobby Boucher is sacking Matt Stafford for the 2nd time of the drive, forcing the Rams to go 3-and-out on their opening drive, and it seems like the Saints now have a lot of momentum as they end up getting another stop, though this time in field goal range where the Rams would take a 3-point lead. And then all of a sudden the Rams had no problem making plays all over this Rams defense, getting themselves well across the 50 where Bobby was coming up with some incredible gravity-defying tackles. I didn't even know it was possible for somebody to move like this. But it didn't stop there because the Rams would have a chance to put up a touchdown before half, but the Waterboy was making a crazy tackle in the air, stopping the Rams at the goal line and forcing them to settle for another 3 points. Bringing us to the 2nd half where the Saints came up with another stop on the Rams, forcing them to take another field goal that put this game at 9-3, where Bobby was once again timing the snap count and smacking Kyron Williams in the backfield. He had a chance to help his team come back in this game, so Bobby was absolutely locked in, coming up with a TFL on the 2nd straight play. But with this clock ticking down, the Saints would still need to come up with a stop. And it turns out that Bobby Boucher was there to get it done. His 3rd straight tackle in the backfield to give his team the ball back. And now the Saints had a chance to go downfield and win this game. The only question remains is, would this Tyler Show-led offense be able to do it? And it looks like they're about to after getting all the way downfield to the goal line, where they end up getting stopped. And just like that, Bobby Boucher's rookie season was coming to an end, losing to Coach Red Boy U in the Los Angeles Rams 9-3. A very painful loss for Bobby Boucher as he had another incredible game, but there was really just nothing he can do as his offense was not led by competent playmakers. So Bobby was definitely hoping that his team would find some in the offseason, but as far as right now, it turns out that Bobby Boucher would go on to win Defensive Player of the Year. And even though we can't show you his season stats compared to the rest of the players in the league, you can see based on his teammates' career stats that he is on his way to having a Hall of Fame career. But Bobby wants to do more than just make the Hall of Fame, man. He also wants to win a Super Bowl.
Which brings us to today.
where it turns out that the Saints had actually developed a few players and picked up a couple guys in free agency. So now Bobby's just looking forward to getting into his second year with the Saints, and he will be doing it with a little bit of a new coaching staff as Coach Klein is the new defensive coordinator. And they also picked up Farmer Fran for special teams.
What in there?
But it turns out that the Saints were not the only team shaking up their coaching staff, as the Las Vegas Raiders would hire Coach Red Boyu as the head coach. Now Bobby would love to get his revenge and play against them, but the Saints don't play the Raiders this year. One team that they do play though is the Chicago Bears, which is who the Saints will be matched up against in week 1 of the NFL season, and led by Bobby Boucher, they're looking to start this year off with a W. Now, to begin his second season, Bobby in the Saints defense was getting a ton of pressure on Caleb Williams. Even when Bobby wasn't making a play, his teammates were still there to make a tackle and force the Bears to punt the ball away. And it would take all the way until 2 minutes left in the second quarter, but Bobby would officially get his first sack of the season. He was taking down Caleb Williams to set the tone for the defense, and they would eventually follow suit as they end up coming up with their own sack on third down. This Saints defense was dominating in the first half, but it's too bad their offense was not doing the same as they would end up giving up a safety, but Bobby would begin to make up for it by coming up with his second sack of the day. Bobby and his defense were showing just how much they had improved since the last season, as by the fourth quarter Chicago's offense had still put up 0 points, and it didn't look like they were going to get any at all after this defense had completely locked them up, resulting in the New Orleans Saints coming up with their first victory of this season. They take this one 7-2, and Bobby got the season started off right with a pretty good performance, going for 4 tackles and 2 sacks. Now, unfortunately, Bobby did stir up a little bit of controversy, because the following week he posted a picture of Shador and Shiloh Sanders in a CFL uniform on his Instagram story. And the media had perceived it as Bobby taking a shot at Shador, but the truth is Bobby just liked our color blue because it reminded him of some high quality H2O. But either way, Shador didn't really seem like he was a big fan of that. And since he was now the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, he was hyped up leading his team into New Orleans. And with the media hyping this one up as one of the biggest matchups of the season, people were wondering if the Saints were going to be able to pull off back-to-back victories. Now to start this game off, the Cleveland offense was picking apart the Saints. Shador would connect with David Njoku for like a 50-yard gain, bringing the Browns into the red zone, where on this 3rd down and 8, Shador was getting sacked, and Cleveland would have to settle for 3 on this drive as the Saints would go ahead and score a touchdown, leading to a 3rd down and 7 where Bobby would help with his first sack of the day. He is taking down Shador Sanders and forcing the Browns to punt the ball. And at this point, it seems like the Browns are just not able to get anything going. Because on the next drive, Bobby would come out here and say, "Shablaka," smacking the shit out of this running back. And with this Cleveland offense struggling, Shador is getting a little bit frustrated, and he started talking crazy to Bobby.
You that same nigga talking shit on Instagram. You talking on Instagram. You can't fuck with me.
Bobby Boucher was bringing down Shador Sanders again, and it looks like he hit him so hard that by the 4th quarter they brought Deshaun Watson in, and Bobby still doesn't forgive Deshaun for what he had did to those women. So he had to make sure that he would sack Deshaun Watson too, making a play that takes out all the energy out of this Browns drive and gives the Saints their second win of the season. Closing this one out 21-3 with another game where Bobby had a solid performance. He was pretty happy with how the season had been going so far, but he was about to get happier, because it turns out that Vicky Valancourt was about to have a baby soon. You see, Bobby didn't even think that she was pregnant, man. He just thought that she was eating a lot of Cheetos. Either way, Bobby was happy, but he was also pretty nervous about being a dad. Definitely some feelings he would have to learn to deal with as he went forward throughout his season, with the Saints now heading into Pittsburgh looking for their 3rd straight victory. Now this game would get started out great for the Saints as Bobby would smack this ball carrier in the backfield. He was trying to set the tone for the team, man, and he continued to on the very next play, coming up with 2 straight tackles for loss, and this defense was looking good. Things would slowly begin to change though in the next quarter, because the Steelers would start finding ways to pick up first downs, and soon they were in scoring range, bringing us to 2nd and goal where Pittsburgh had no problem finding a receiver who got them in the end zone, taking the lead for the Steelers. And it was not long after that where they were looking to add to it, but Bobby was making it a little bit more difficult after getting a tackle for loss. The Steelers did go up by 2 possessions though, and they would get the ball right back. And in a game where the Saints offense was just not able to get it done, that would make it so that the defense wouldn't be able to either, ultimately resulting in the Saints' first loss of the season, dropping this one 17-0, and it was definitely not a great performance from Bobby as he was still shaking off some nerves from finding out that he was going to be a dad soon. But he was hoping that he would be able to bounce back as he was heading back on the road into his next game. And this one would actually be the first game of the season against a division rival, with the Saints looking to match up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now Bobby was doing a great job bouncing back early in this one as he came up with a sack to begin this game. He was already setting the tone for this defense as they held Atlanta to 0 points all throughout the first quarter, and they were looking to do the same in the second with another big hit in the backfield. Bobby Boucher was lighting it up in the first half of this one. And no matter what the Falcons tried to do, it seemed like they just couldn't get it done. Bringing us to a 1st down and 10 where Bobby had dropped back into coverage and said, "Wang!" Bobby Boucher comes up with his first pick of the season. He is having an incredible game already and is really trying to make up for last week. And with Bobby now having his X factor, it looked like the Saints were about to dominate this game. But then the Falcons would begin to change that, as they come up with a big reception downfield that brings them all the way into the red zone. And with less than a minute left in the half, this ball goes right over Bobby's head for a touchdown. The Falcons would tie this game up at 7, and after halftime, it would be tied up at 10. But at this point, the Falcons have figured out a way to get things moving on the Saints. And by the time the 4th quarter came around, they would eventually take the lead. And I am definitely not going to lie to y'all, it is not looking good for the Saints defense, especially after the offense gives the ball back, as the Falcons now have it in excellent territory to go up 2 possessions here in the 4th quarter. And after they do come out here and score a touchdown with Kyle Pitts, that would be enough to put this game away. The Saints would drop their second straight 24-10, and Bobby had an excellent game, but he would be ultimately let down by his offense. Either way, it was pretty cool for Bobby to be recognized as the Defensive Player of the Week. He still really did want to become one of the best football players of all time. And now that he knew he had a kid in a way, he had to work hard to inspire them to one day be great too. But he also didn't want his kid to look back at his games and think that he had bad drip. So Bobby figured it was time to maybe start trying on some new helmets, and he was looking forward to testing one out heading into the next game, as the Saints are heading on the road again to face off against one of the tougher teams in the league, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now it turns out that with Travis Kelce having married Taylor Swift and retired from the NFL, the Chiefs would move somebody else into that role, as Noah Gray was now the guy for Kansas City. He turned out to be a problem for the Saints defense early on. But it wasn't just him, because Kansas City definitely had some other weapons, and with the Saints not being known for necessarily having the fastest secondary, it wasn't a surprise that the Chiefs were passing all over them all throughout this game. But by the end of this one, with less than 30 seconds left, the Saints needed to come up with a stop if they wanted a chance, and they eventually did. The defense gave the offense an opportunity to make something happen, but it didn't look like they would be able to. Until they scored a 98-yard touchdown. The Saints would score on the last play of the game, sending this one into overtime. But although the offense was not able to put up any more points at OT, the defense was able to come up with a stop, resulting in this one being a tie. The Saints come back from a 17-0 second half deficit to not lose this game, and they make it happen despite Bobby having probably his worst performance of his career. At this point, sitting at 2-2-1 on the season, Bobby and Coach Klein were trying to figure out new ways to become better on the season, and they were hoping they could find those ways quickly, as they were soon heading back on the road, where this time they were getting into another game against a division rival, with the Saints looking to face off against the Carolina Panthers. Now, despite the fact that Carolina had drove down the field early on, Bobby had put an end to their drive with a sack, forcing them to settle for 3 points, and that really gave the Saints some momentum going forward. Because in the second quarter on this 3rd down, the Saints were coming up with another stop, forcing Carolina to punt the ball. But with the Saints offense not showing up early today, Bobby knew somebody got to get some points. So with Carolina backed up against his own 1-yard line, he timed the snap count and came up with a safety. Bobby Boucher is putting up more points than his own offense. That's crazy. But what's even crazier is that the Saints would give the ball back to Carolina on their own goal line. And with 1 second left in the half, Bobby Boucher was helping to get another safety. He by himself had more points than the opposing team throughout the first half. And it would continue to stay that way until the very end of the game, where Carolina would come out here and put up a touchdown, bringing us to this 2-point attempt where they would come up with the conversion, sending this game into overtime. Fortunately though, the Saints come up with a touchdown to take the lead back, and after Bobby comes out here and drops Bryce Young in the backfield for the 3rd time on the day, he's got the Panthers so demoralized that they actually decide to punt the ball and give the Saints the win in overtime, closing this one out 18-11 thanks to an incredible game from Bobby. He had absolutely balled out in this one and was getting a lot of attention from the media because of it. Ultimately though, he would go on to give Coach Klein a lot of the credit. But after Bobby has just won another Defensive Player of the Week, he's feeling pretty good heading into his next game. And what's even better is that it's his first time at home in a few weeks, so he's looking forward to showing out for this crowd as they take on the Atlanta Falcons. Now throughout the first half of this game, Bobby and his defense were demolishing Atlanta. If it wasn't Bobby coming up with a big play, it would probably be Chase Young, who had developed into a really great player. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but this Saints defense has a ton of stars all over, and it's probably why by the end of this one, they would come up with a pick, creating a turnover that would give the Saints their 4th win of the year, closing this one out 21-9 in a game where Bobby actually did not do too well, which is why later on Coach Klein would hit him up and talk to him about their next game. because it looked like it was going to be one of the toughest games of the season, with them heading on the road to face off against the Ravens. But all throughout this game, it actually seemed like it was going to be a tough game for both teams, as by the fourth quarter it was still tied at 3. But that was all about to change, despite the fact that Bobby was helping to combine with the tackle for loss, because the Ravens would take a 6-3 lead and the Saints offense just could not put up any more points, leading to a 3rd down and 17 where the Ravens would finally unleash Lamar Jackson. And out of nowhere, man, this dude is literally just running past the entire defense, and he was on his way to the end zone to put this one away. So the Saints are taking another L in the year here, man, but you know, it's all good, because they would have another opportunity to bounce back in their next game against a very good team. They are heading up north to try and get a win against Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings. Now this is another game where early on things are looking good for the Saints, as Bobby Boucher comes up with another safety. He smacks this running back in the backfield to put his team up by 2 points, and he's hoping that could be the beginning of a great game from his team. Eventually though, by the end of this first half, Minnesota would start moving his ball, getting down inside scoring range where they threw right into Bobby's zone, and Minnesota comes up with a touchdown to take the lead. Now luckily though, the Saints would score a touchdown of their own and take the lead right back. And with the Waterboy coming up with a sack on JJ McCarthy, the Saints were hoping that they can hold Minnesota to 7 points throughout the rest of the game. And by the fourth quarter, it looks like they might be able to. They were brought to a 2nd down and 12, where the Vikings would end up finding Justin Jefferson up the seam, and somehow he was outrunning this entire defense to the crib for a touchdown, putting up a score that would go on to give the Saints their 2nd straight loss. Things were not looking good for the Saints, sitting at 4-4 on the season. The Buccaneers were very good this season, and having a mediocre record would definitely not get the Saints into the playoffs. So they knew they would have to turn it around eventually, and luckily, instead of the media focusing on the losses, a lot of people were excited about Bobby having a baby, but since Vicky wasn't due until after the season, they would have to wait for now. And instead, Bobby would try and help his team get back in the win column as they were back at home to face off against the Green Bay Packers. Now this was another game where Bobby and his defense were playing well, at least until the second half, because Jordan Love was finding a receiver that would push Green Bay into the end zone, tying this game up at 14. Bringing us here late to the fourth quarter, where Green Bay was taking a shot to the end zone to take the lead, but the Saints come up with a pick, creating a turnover with less than a minute left. And for the first time in a few weeks, the Saints are back in the win column. This is a huge victory for the Saints to keep them in the playoff race, but they're going to need to start stringing together some W's if they really want to solidify a spot. And they're about to have a great chance to do so heading into another home game against the Bengals. Now somehow Cincinnati started this game backed up against their own goal line. And with Bobby having mastered time in a snap count out of single back and I formations, he knew exactly what to do as he dropped Chase Brown in the backfield. Bobby almost gave that man a concussion as he puts his team up by 2 points. Unfortunately though, he was not the only one on defense making big plays, as Cincinnati would also come up with the safety, tying this game up at 2-2. But with Cincinnati beginning to enter Saints territory, Bobby Boucher was coming up with a sack. He would single-handedly derail the Cincinnati drive and keep them at 2 points until the fourth quarter, where with the chance for the Bengals to go downfield and either tie this game up or take the lead, Bobby knew he had to come out here and say, Bobby Boucher comes up with his 2nd pick of the season, creating a turnover that gives his team the ball back in the final moments of the game and officially give them their 6th win of the year. The Saints closed this one out in one of the lowest scoring games in NFL history. I mean, this was clearly a performance where Bobby and his defense had completely carried this offense, but Bobby knew that was something that they might have to keep doing if they wanted any chance to compete this season. The Saints had a very tough schedule ahead of them, and it was going to be difficult for them to keep up this level of play, especially when facing off against some of the best teams in the league, like the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, although New Orleans had the lead pretty much all throughout the first half, Philly was driving downfield trying to change that, bringing themselves to the goal line where on 3rd down, A.J. Brown was getting in for a touchdown. And if it wasn't already difficult enough to be playing against the Eagles, their own offense would give the Eagles the ball back with great field position. Luckily though, the Saints did come up with a stop to hold them to only 3 points. Now by the fourth quarter, the Saints did take the lead back, going up by 1 point. But it looked like the momentum was on Philadelphia's side as Saquon Barkley was dropping Bobby Boucher. Oh nah, see, Bobby didn't like that right there, so he knew he had to come up with a big play by sacking Jalen Hurts, bringing the Eagles to 4th down and 19 with the game on the line. The Saints right here would be able to put this one away. All they had to do was just come up with a stop. The Saints had given up a huge play that put Philadelphia in field goal range, but if it couldn't get any worse, the Eagles would still go on to score a touchdown, taking the lead with less than a minute left in this game and handing the Saints another loss on the season. The Saints take probably one of the worst losses of the year. It was another game where the defense had showed up, but the offense just could not get anything going. And Bobby was extremely upset that they were not able to get the win in this one, but at the very least, the Saints still had a chance to make the playoffs. They were going to have to come up with a win streak though, but it was not going to be easy to do with the Saints now heading back on the road, facing off against one of the better teams in the league, the Detroit Lions. Now, in a game where Detroit already put up 7 points, Bobby knew he had to step up. He didn't want to trust that his offense was going to be able to score too many more points, so he was out here running all over the field and even said "mwang" to Jahmyr Gibbs, forcing a 3-and-out here at the beginning of the second quarter, and at the end of the first half, Bobby was meeting Gibbs in the backfield. Bobby felt like he really just set the tone for his team as they would soon be up 21-7 after half. But after Detroit makes a couple plays that gets him in the end zone for a touchdown, things would begin to change. And it's beginning to look like this might be a game where the defense was actually letting the offense down, because after the Saints take a 23-15 lead, this defense is letting Jahmyr Gibbs get wide open, who takes it the distance for a touchdown with a chance to tie this game up. And with the Saints having one of the worst 2-point conversion defenses in the league, they let Detroit get it done, ultimately sending this game into overtime, where after the Saints come out here and come up with a sack on second down, Detroit decided that they were just going to be fine with taking a tie, and they would end up settling for a 23-23 draw. Not exactly what the Saints wanted to see out of this game, considering that they had the lead all throughout the first half. But on the bright side, Bobby had an excellent game, and he knew that with a couple weeks left in the year, he might be able to help his team solidify a spot in the postseason. So he just had to lock in and try and help his team get the job done on the road, with the Saints now looking to face off against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, in what's probably one of the biggest games of the year, this one was tied at 0 in the fourth quarter. But with less than a minute left in this game, this Saints defense had a chance to back the Bucks up and get a safety. But although they are not able to get the job done on defense, they are able to get it done on offense in overtime, bringing us here to a 3rd down and 3 where Chase Young would come up with a sack. A player who was an integral part of the Saints defense comes up with a play, and it turns out that Tampa Bay didn't even want to bother trying to tie this game up, because just like another team early in the season, they also punt this ball away, moving the Saints to 8-5-3 on the season. And it's looking like the Saints are actually in a weird spot here, because if they can come up with a win in their last game of the year, then they might even have a chance to get home field advantage, especially with the Bucks loss. So we are definitely going to have to look out for that as we are heading into the final game of the regular season. The Saints can have a chance to punch their ticket to the NFL playoffs, but the only way to do that is if they can find a way to take down a division rival, the Carolina Panthers. Now, Carolina would have the lead to start the second quarter of this game, but Bobby was looking forward to changing that. He came up with his first sack of the day to derail a Carolina drive, but he knew that this was only just the beginning. This defense had to be locked in and give the offense as many opportunities as possible to put up points. And they were doing a great job of that by coming up with 3 sacks in just the first half alone. Eventually, though, in the second half, though, Carolina would move down to the goal line, so Bobby knew he had to say shablaka, smacking this running back into next season and really setting the tone for the team as they would end up coming up with a stop on 3rd and goal, allowing the Saints to eventually take the lead by 1 point, bringing us here to a 4th down and 8 with the game on the line for Carolina. And with the chance to officially solidify their spot in the playoffs, it was Bobby Boucher coming up with a sack on Bryce Young on 4th down to not only give his offense the ball back, but give them a win in the last game of the season. The Saints would barely win this one 7-6 thanks to another amazing game from Bobby Boucher. He put up 3 sacks in a game that might potentially help his team get to the playoffs, but we're about to find out for sure after we sim this week. And it turns out that the Saints would not only make the playoffs, but they would gain home field advantage. This is a huge turnaround on the season for the Saints because things were not looking good for them early on. So they were more than thankful for their young superstar Bobby Boucher, who, although we cannot see his season stats, EA please fix that please, we can see how his stats compare to the rest of the NFC South. And he actually leads the entire division in tackles for loss throughout their entire career, and Bobby has only played 2 seasons. And it's probably why Bobby was in line to win his 2nd straight Defensive Player of the Year, right in front of former Dallas Cowboy Micah Parsons. Fuck Jerry Jones, by the way. But now it is time for the Waterboy to head into the playoffs, where he and the Saints are hoping that they can make use of the home field advantage and get themselves to the next round against the Detroit Lions. Now, the Saints would have a 7-0 lead early on in this one, and by the end of the first quarter, Bobby was coming up with his first sack of the day, making a big play for this defense and setting the tone for them going forward, because Detroit's opening drive would actually last almost throughout the entire second quarter. For some reason, they were out here trying to chew the clock, but it didn't seem like that was going to work out for them as Chase Young got home for a sack. After letting up over 20 points last game against the Lions, somehow this time they held him to 0 points in the first half. Bringing us to the second half here, where this Saints defense just started demolishing Detroit. Man, it got so bad that Bobby had said "Mwang" to this running back at the goal line, derailing another Detroit drive, leading us here to a 4th down in the 4th quarter where the Lions were pretty much on their last legs. They had one more chance to start trying to get themselves back in this game, but instead they throw a pick. The Saints take over in this one in the 4th quarter, and this defense was leading the Saints into the next round of the playoffs. The Saints complete the 13-0 shutout at home, and Bobby had definitely made an impact coming up with a sack and a couple tackles for loss to get there. Now at this point, man, Bobby is ready to rise to the occasion and potentially help his team get to the Super Bowl. But it doesn't seem like his starting quarterback was on the same page. Because Tyler Shot, however you pronounce it, this dude was out here trying to have a slumber party on the night before the game. But you see, Bobby knew that he did not have time for all that. He spent some time looking at the playbook with Coach Klein, and soon he was ready to head into his next game, where after it seems like the Saints are at home once again, that means that they're about to face off against one of the lower seeded teams, and they could potentially have a good chance of getting to the NFC Championship if they could find a way to take down the New York Giants. Now, for what seems like the 5th time this season, the Saints have their opponent backed up on their own 1-yard line, and Bobby Boucher comes up with the play. He gets what could be his 5th safety of the season. An absolutely incredible play that puts his team up 2 and then 9 after his team scores a touchdown. So at this point, the Saints are looking pretty good, but they're about to look even better after Malik Neighbors fumbles, and it was Bobby Boucher who recovered. Bobby Boucher has the ball, and he is running down the sideline for his first touchdown of the season. Bobby Boucher is making one of the biggest plays of his career in one of the biggest games of his life. And he didn't even really have to do nothing, man. That ball just went right into his hands. Either way, the Waterboy scores a touchdown. And after the Saints go up by 16, they have all the momentum on their side. Especially after Bobby comes out here and gets his first sack of the day. Bobby Boucher was dominating the Giants. And after the Saints went up 3 possessions in the first half, it didn't seem like Bobby had any plans of slowing down. The Waterboy is getting another sack, and you know what? He has no plans of stopping here. Because in the second half, he comes out here and gets his 3rd one of the day, dropping Jackson Dart in the backfield again, and if that wasn't enough, the Saints would go up by 30 points, and Bobby Boucher would come out here and get his 4th sack of the night. The New Orleans Saints would dominate this one start to finish, and with the help of both sides of the ball, they are moving on to the NFC Championship game. This was one of, if not the biggest win for the Saints all season, just obliterating the Giants 30-0. Mostly thanks to an all-time performance from Bobby Boucher, who had 4 sacks and 1 defensive touchdown. Probably one of the best performances of Bobby's life, and he was feeling great about heading into the next game. At least until he realized that he would be playing against Green Bay. And although Bobby likes that high-quality H2O, he does not like that high-quality freezing-ass snow, which is what it looks like they're going to have to deal with heading into the next game against Green Bay. But in other news, it also turns out that Coach Red Boy U, well, he and the Raiders are in the AFC Championship game. And obviously Bobby's trying to make it to the Super Bowl anyway, but it'll be a crazy matchup if the Raiders are able to make it too. For now, Bobby's just going to focus on what's in front of him though, and he's lucky if he'll be able to even see what's in front of him heading into the next game against Green Bay, where it looks like there is a complete and total blizzard at this point, and the Saints are going to have to fight through it if they want any chance at potentially making a Super Bowl. Now with the Packers already being acclimated to this weather, it was not a surprise that their offense would start out hot, coming up with a play that brings them somewhere on the field, I don't even know. They were on a nice little drive though and looked like they were about to get some points until Josh Jacobs fumbled the ball. The snow is already having an effect on the Packers, and it doesn't seem to be affecting the Saints as much as they go up by 10 points. Bringing us to the end of the first half with less than a minute left, where Bobby puts a spin move on a defender and comes up with a sack on Jordan Love. A huge play that pretty much derailed this Packer drive as they come to a 3rd down and 16, bringing us to another play where Josh Jacobs fumbles again. This time, though, not only do the Saints recover the ball, but they are taking this one the distance for a touchdown. The New Orleans Saints go up by 17 points, and Bobby Boucher can't even believe it. He has to make sure that he is not dreaming because this don't make no damn sense. The New Orleans Saints were absolutely annihilating the Packers. Bringing us to the 4th quarter here where the Packers had one more chance to get back in this game, but they cannot convert the 4th down. And after a slow and rocky start to the beginning of the season, Bobby Boucher is leading the Saints to their 2nd ever Super Bowl. They come on the road here in Green Bay in the freezing snow and somehow find a way to get the job done. Bobby didn't even really have to do much in this game, man, because the Packers were pretty much doing everything themselves. They had turned the ball over too much, allowing the Saints to completely take over. But at this point, it is now time for the Saints team to really lock in, and Bobby Boucher was fired up. He continued to work on anything else that he could improve heading into the biggest game of his entire life. Not only because the Saints were officially heading to the Super Bowl, but because it turns out that they would be facing off against Coach Red Boy U and the Las Vegas Raiders. So So at this point, the Waterboy knows that he has to be at his very best and bring a Super Bowl title back to New Orleans. Now, I don't know what happened with the Saints offense in the playoffs, but somehow all of a sudden they are playing out of their mind. They have been extremely consistent, just like this defense, as they come up with a stop here on this opening drive and maintain a 7-0 lead into the second quarter, bringing us to a 3rd down and 10 where the Saints were trying to come up with another stop, but instead they come up with a pick. They force a turnover against Las Vegas to hold them to 0 points throughout the first half, and it's safe to say that this defense was feeling themselves. Unfortunately though, all of a sudden this offense was not getting the job done, and the Saints were still only up by 7 points in the second half. And with the Raiders beginning to put a little bit of a drive together, the Saints needed somebody to come out here and make a play, bringing us here to a 2nd down and 9 where it was Bobby Boucher! He's coming up with a pick, and he's taking this one the distance for a touchdown, baby! The Waterboy makes the biggest play of his life, giving the Saints a 2-possession lead in the second half of the Super Bowl. Bobby Boucher had Coach Red Boy U shook on the sideline, so he decided to tell Geno Smith to come out here on the next drive and try and get in Bobby's head by talking crazy to him.
There's something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
Bobby Boucher comes up with his first sack in the Super Bowl, and Coach Red realizes that it's probably not a good idea for his players to be talking to Bobby, because by the 4th quarter the Saints are still up by 2 possessions, and Bobby's still upset that Geno said that there was something wrong with his medulla oblongata. So Bobby had to make sure the Raiders knew that by saying, "Wang up!" Bobby Boucher comes up with what, his 6th safety of the season? He hit Aston GT so hard that one of his linemen felt it, and it looks like he'll be out for the rest of the game too, bringing us here to around 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter, where at this point this defense is just swarming the ball and Geno Smith is getting sacked again. Everything is going the Saints' way as they bring the Raiders to 4th down and 26, and with the chance for them to potentially get back in this game, they are not able to convert, which means that the New Orleans Saints, led by Bobby Boucher, for the 2nd time in the franchise history, they are getting the job done and winning the Super Bowl. The New Orleans Saints shut out the Raiders 18-0. And this entire team absolutely dominated all throughout the playoffs. They started off this year playing mediocre and somehow turned it on later on in the year, finding a way to get the job done in the end to not only get to the Super Bowl, but finding a way to win it against one of the best teams in the league and Coach Red Boy U. Now Bobby would go on to have one of the best games of his life. 3 tackles for loss, a sack, an interception, and a huge pick 6. Bobby Boucher was on top of the world and at this point was already considered to be one of the best players of all time. And after winning a Heisman Trophy and a championship in college, and then a Super Bowl MVP in the NFL, the Waterboys' legacy in football would be cemented forever. Now Bobby would not only win the Saints their 2nd Super Bowl, but he would also earn himself his 2nd Defensive Player of the Year, continuing to establish himself as one of the greatest defensive players of all time. And if that wasn't great enough, it turns out that Vicky and Bobby would have their baby. And out the womb, this kid looked like he's trying to play some football. Oh, look at him, he's so cute. Bobby was definitely looking forward to his son playing eventually, but for now he was just looking forward to enjoying the offseason. And after a year where he had 81 total tackles, 17 sacks, and a Super Bowl MVP, I'd not only say that it's deserved, but I'd go as far as to say that Bobby's on his way to the Hall of Fame. And mind you, he's only 2 seasons into his NFL career. But this was part 5 of The Waterboy. And if you want to see a part 6 of The Waterboy on a new team or potentially see Bobby Boucher III play some football, then be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you guys to this point, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time. Mwah.